Events begin at a construction site where preparatory work is underway. A foreman stood on the site and said in a loud voice where the diver was. The construction foreman was near the pit with the water mixture. While holding a wad of money, he said, "Whoever comes down and completes the task, I will pay him 20,000 yuan." Suddenly, from the crowd of workers, a man's hand appeared and raised it higher than everyone else. A short guy with a construction helmet on his head came out of the crowd and said that he would try to do this task. Metal cables were lowered into a tank filled to the top with water. Having put on a diving suit, the guy sat down on the tank and said that he was ready to carry out the task, but the construction foreman said out loud that this task was not for someone as weak as him, but he thought that he could handle it. Through the mask, the guy said that money doesn't earn itself. Holding on to the safety rope, the builder said that he had been gone for a long time, whether he had suffocated or maybe he was just pretending, but another worker did not see him on the computer display either and said that he had probably dived quite deeply. Suddenly, the worker shouted that for some reason, the connection with the guy had been lost, and most likely the program had crashed, and they needed to get him out faster. The water in the tank was very cloudy. Suddenly, the water foamed, and a guy in a diving suit jumped out at lightning speed and seemed to be hanging on the sides of the tank. Taking off his diving suit helmet, the guy said that the task had been completed and that the construction foreman should give him money for this work. The foreman held out his hands with the money, saying that it's hard to say that you're a kid and you value money more than your own life. The young guy's name was Yu Xiaobei. He was only 18 years old, and he was forced to work to pay for his sister's treatment, and therefore grabbed any job, even the hardest one. The main character was ready to do anything to save his very sick sister. The guy, leaving the construction site, thought about what if he could get that much money every day. Yu Xiaobei, he was holding a wad of money, and suddenly a red liquid came out of his nose. One of the workers saw the guy and what happened to him. The worker said that, "Dude, it's really worth it because you're risking your life to get these pennies." The guy raised his head and said that if he didn't need money, he wouldn't have done such a thing in life. The secret stranger told the guy that he could give him a chance to get rich, but to do this, he just needed to play a game, and that it was very safe, and would he like to try? The guy looked at the stranger and thought something. The hero thought that as soon as he has money in his hands, all sorts of scammers are already right there, and he simply remained silent to the stranger's words. And he, in turn, said that most likely you are not interested and wished him all the best. The boy was quickly approaching the medical facility. Suddenly, a message from his sister came to the guy's phone, telling him to eat well and not skimp on himself and buy the products he loves. Walking along the corridor of a medical institution, the guy accidentally saw Dr. Lee and said that he was going just to see him, and what a coincidence that he immediately saw him. Seeing a guy wearing torn clothes, the doctor thought something. Suddenly, Dr. Lee told the hero not to come so close to him, and also warned that the bills this month had not been paid, and he had no right to treat his sister until they paid. The doctor also said that, in addition, the sister's condition began to deteriorate and she needed a transplant as soon as possible. But given their situation, he did not think that they would be able to raise the required amount, and that they would begin to mentally prepare for the worst outcome. Having lowered his head, the main character told the doctor that he would definitely collect the required amount of money, but the doctor did not react to these words and thought that he was unlikely to collect several 100,000. At this time, a mysterious stranger stood in the hospital around the corner and heard the entire conversation that was taking place with the guy and the doctor about the operation and his sister. The main character entered the ward where his sister was lying, and leaning towards her, he thought about what he should do and how he could find such a huge amount for the operation. His sister lay in a hospital bed under an oxygen mask with her eyes closed. The guy looked at his sister with a gaze and thought about what to do. The main character thought about calling his father and asking for money for his sister's operation. The father immediately answered the phone and said that he had already said that he would not give him a penny of money, and also said that even if he found the required amount of money, it was not a fact that his sister would never recover. In a rude voice, his father told him that he could go to school normally only if he gave him time to solve his affairs, and he would arrange a wonderful funeral for his sister. Having heard such a conversation, the guy said that he was not a person at all, and not only that, by playing gambling, he wanted to drag them into it, and he would not let him harm his sister. The boy could not stand it and said that his father was such a ruthless bastard. After this conversation, the guy felt uneasy, and he was even tired of listening to his father's nonsense. The hero left the room into the hospital corridor and looked up and saw something. At the other end of the corridor, Yu Xiaobei saw the shadow of a man and recognized him as the stranger who offered him to play the game. The stranger raised his hand and said hello to the hero. And with a quick step, he began to walk towards the guy along the corridor. The guy was very worried that he was following him and why he was hiding his face, and also told him that he was an asshole and it would be better for him to quickly get out of here before he called the police. Slapping the hero on the shoulder, the stranger said that he had misunderstood him. The secret stranger said that he was looking for him to offer to play a game with him. He told the guy that there are 3 streets, and he has 5 minutes of time, and if he manages to catch him, he will thank him generously. After thinking, the stranger told the guy that for such a game, he would give him 100,000 yuan as a prize. The guy shouted that he was most likely scamming him, and he wouldn't fall for it so easily. Seeing a certain logo on the stranger's clothes, the hero thought that it seemed familiar to him. The stranger clapped his fingers, thought something, and said silently in his mind, "The mysterious stranger said to Yu Xiaobei says that the deposit of 20,000 yuan is already in his account, and if he manages to catch it, he will transfer the rest of the amount." The guy thought about this proposal. The hero looked closely, could not think that this could be true, and suddenly an SMS notification from Ace Bank arrived on his phone, saying that a transfer of 20,000 yuan had been credited to his account, 3341, but the guy could not understand where the stranger got his bank card number. The main character asked the stranger a question about where he got his card number, and if suddenly he did not want to participate in this game, but interrupting the conversation, the stranger said that if not, then there was no need to return the deposit to him. The guy looked at him and thought that something was wrong here, and apparently he had nothing much to lose, and it didn't matter whether he won or lost, the money would still remain with him, and quietly said that he accepted the challenge. Hearing this, the stranger jumped out of the window and shouted that the countdown had begun and the game had already begun. Yu Xiaobei, looking out the window, saw the stranger falling to the ground in flight. He opened the window and thought about how he was able to jump from such a height, and, as if nothing had happened, he was already standing on the asphalt, safe and without damage. Closing the window, the hero thought that even if all this sounds stupid, let him prepare his money here and rush down the stairs. Running along the staircase, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of game this was and who this mysterious stranger was. The hero ran out of the medical facility and ran towards the stranger. The countdown has begun. Yu Xiaobei saw a stranger who ran around the corner of the building and rushed after him at great speed. The hero thought that he was already too far away and he wouldn't be able to catch up with him if he ran after him like crazy. And it's good that he goes this way to his sister and knows her at least a little. Running away very quickly, he quickly thought that right here at the crossroads of the streets, he could shorten the path a little in order to overtake the stranger. Time flew by very quickly, and he ran headlong to catch up with it. The guy, while running, grabbed the railing and thought that it would help him in the future. Pushing off with great speed, he tried to jump over a large number of steps in order to quickly go down. Time also did not stand still, and the guy's numbers were constantly changing in his head. Passing passers-by saw how he flashed near them with lightning speed, shouting after him that he was working miracles, but the guy did not react to this. Fixing his gaze, he ran towards his goal. Jumping Yu Xiaobei seemed to be fluttering in the air like a butterfly, flying over the steps in search of a stranger. Suddenly, running to the second floor, he saw a secret stranger ahead, who decided to hide around the corner. Having run further, the hero already saw his opponent in his field of vision. Time also did not stand still. As he ran further, he became very tired and stopped for a moment and thought something. Every time you approach a stranger, he immediately disappears somewhere. Suddenly, he thought that this was not an ordinary catch-up, but the secret stranger did not look tired at all, and his strength was running out very quickly. Pulling his phone out of his pocket where the stopwatch stood, the guy saw that the time was almost up, which means he had failed, and still thought about how he could be stopped. Suddenly, he saw a one-story building in front of him, and raising his head, he thought about how to defeat it. He jumped onto the roof of the building and decided to shorten the distance. Having run along the roof from the beginning of the building to the end, he stopped. Suddenly, the guy stopped at the very end of the roof and looked down. He was very scared when he saw how high he was on the roof. Yu Xiaobei stood on the edge and realized that if he jumped from this height, he was unlikely to survive. Suddenly, he saw a secret stranger below, who was running down the house along the roadway. Suddenly, the thought occurred to the guy that if he jumped down, the job would be done, but at the same time, he was very afraid that he would fall to his death. Suddenly, he unexpectedly stumbled, but stayed on the edge of the roof. Time kept moving forward and forward. Running along the roof of the house, he saw a secret stranger running down the street below and thought that he did not have time and his sister's life was at stake. Moving back along the roof, he began to run as fast as possible. The guy screamed loudly as he ran across the roof of the house, and suddenly, like a bird, he jumped down with lightning speed after the stranger. Time was running faster and faster. Suddenly, the stranger raised his head and saw Yu Xiaobei flies straight at his head and immediately stops from fear. Having fallen on the asphalt, the stranger thought that this seemed to be the end, because an ordinary person most likely made a mistake again. The time on the stopwatch was running to the end. Secrets, the stranger heard the guy shout that he had caught up with him and still won. While jumping from the roof, the guy accidentally grabbed the hood of the stranger's clothes. How suddenly Yu Xiaobei saw his electronic eye, which glowed with a green beam. The hero was greatly frightened by what he saw, and tears appeared on his face. But still, the guy was very glad that he caught up with him. Further events take place at the foot of two high-rise buildings. Yu Xiaobei was very tired and leaning on the wall, thinking about his victory over the stranger who stood nearby and pretended that nothing had happened. Suddenly, the guy received an SMS notification on his phone that a payment in the amount of 80,000 yuan had been received into his account, and the hero thought that he had just earned 100,000 yuan. The mysterious stranger congratulated the guy and told him that he had won a prize and would he like to get even more, and each subsequent game would be accompanied by a large monetary revival. The exhausted guy stood bent over and writhed from the pain he received while jumping from the roof and being chased, but still shouted that he wanted to continue the game. As long as they had money, he was in business. Looking at him, the cyborg said, "Well, we'll play with you if that's what you want." Suddenly, Yu Xiaobei saw something and screamed. Suddenly, the cyborg approached the guy and put an electronic bracelet on his hand while his eyes glowed with a blue beam of light. Having snapped the bracelet onto the guy's wrist, the player's identity began to be scanned. After the scan, he had a very bad headache. Through his eyes, he could hardly see the outline of the cyborg. Having fallen to the floor, right under the cyborg's feet, he fell asleep from extreme fatigue. The guy lay there and did not move. Only the sounds of breathing could be heard a little. Having opened his eyes slightly, he did not understand where he was and what had happened to him before. Raising his head from the floor, he saw a skull and part of the hand of an unknown person. Right before his eyes, he saw a torn part of the phalanx of a finger and was a little scared. Suddenly, he received an emergency notification to complete the mission, and a timer was set to 5 minutes. When suddenly he saw 2 small monsters sitting on the floor. These were 2 monster girls. Clattering their iron teeth, their eyes glowed like red lanterns, and they were very unhappy that the hero ended up here in this game. Suddenly, a message was heard that the game was about to begin, and everyone was asked to get ready. He saw that there was a screen on the table with a timer on, and the task had to be completed in 5 minutes. Then, the monitor showed information that you need to survive for 5 minutes, and the game will start in 5 seconds. Wu Yu Xiaobei had a very bad headache and gave him no rest, and he asked that the game not start. Thinking that after the electronic bracelet was put on him, he immediately lost consciousness and did not understand where he was. When he suddenly raised his hand and the number 4 appeared on the bracelet, he did not immediately understand what was happening. Suddenly, the number 3 appeared on the bracelet, and when he looked up, he saw 2 monster girls who were gnawing clothes and dead bodies that were lying on the floor. The number 2 appeared on the bracelet, and the guy thought that something was wrong. When suddenly he saw a monster girl on the monitor, as well as the number 1, indicating that the game had begun. Suddenly, unexpectedly, he saw a monster girl in front of him, her teeth chattering with her mouth open, her eyes burning like red lanterns, and she was thirsty for blood. Suddenly, monsters began to approach you at lightning speed. Xiaobei to deal with him. The guy looked at the monsters in bewilderment and thought about what was happening, and it seemed to him that these 2 were clearly unfriendly towards him. Screaming, he said that he would definitely die here from them. The time on the monitor began to work against him as the monsters decided to attack him. Suddenly, the hero thought that, first, he needed to quickly look around and try to hide from them. A strange voice constantly said that you need to hold out for 5 minutes, but there was little time and you had to somehow survive. Suddenly, turning back, he saw a monster approaching him and clapping its teeth. Yu Xiaobei thought that one monster had disappeared somewhere, and he needed to control their movement. Suddenly, he saw a second monster who crept up on him from behind and wanted his red liquid. Suddenly, sneaking up behind him in one movement, the monster grabbed his shoulder with its teeth and tore out a piece of clothing and skin. Having bitten off the tasty morsel, the monster began to run away sharply, and red liquid ran behind it in large drops. The guy saw drops of red liquid and he felt uneasy, but in the confusion, he still continued to run away from them. After such a wound, the hero almost landed on the floor, but looking around, he saw a monster waving its claws behind him. The monster barely reached the guy with its sharp claws and scratched him on the back. After such a battle, he thought that they have very sharp claws, and they only look like they hunt together. Yu Xiaobei was thinking about what to do and how he could continue to fight these monsters. Suddenly, he raised his hand and saw that his pulse on the bracelet had increased to 140, and from such tension he was quickly very tired. Looking at the monitor board, he saw the time, and with shouts that half had not yet passed, but they had already bothered me almost to death. Suddenly, he saw a picture of one monster climbing onto the back of another and trying to attack him. The monster jumped up at a high distance and tried to attack the guy directly from above, hovering down in the air. Suspecting that the monster was trying to attack him from above, he sharply turned his head and thought about what was best to do. Suddenly, the monster was already flying from top to bottom and wanted in its red liquid. The hero's eyes burned like lights from fear. when suddenly he heard a blow on his back. It was a monster who was trying to dig into his back with its claws and sharp claws, and was screaming in a voice that was not his own. The monster had a very large mouth with huge fangs, and at the same time he was thirsty for the red liquid. Suddenly, the main character turned around and thought to himself that he would not sit and wait for his death. The guy's strength began to leave due to severe pain in the back, but he gathered himself and clenched his fist in his hand, and with one precise blow, he tried to hit this bloodthirsty monster. From an accurate and targeted blow, the monster floated in the air, and red liquid ran behind it, and it seemed that he was already unconscious. The bracelet showed an increased pulse, which was already 165, and he thought that the monster had beaten him badly in this fight. Yu Xiaobei thought that he couldn't give up so easily. There were only 2 minutes left, and he had to survive by any means possible. When suddenly he saw again 2 monsters who were trying to catch up and attack him. Suddenly, one monster grabbed the guy's fingers with his claws and sharp claws, and with screams tried to pull him into his mouth. As a friend, he heard a strong, sharp pain on his finger, and it was as if someone had broken them alive without anesthesia. Yu Xiaobei screamed in a voice that was not his own due to severe pain, and cold sweat and tears flowed down his face from such shock. Seeing his fingers on his hand, which were broken and turned the other way, he almost lost consciousness. Closing his teeth tightly, he shouted that he could not die and could not come to terms with this, but the monsters repeatedly tried to attack him from behind. Suddenly, the hero heard an emergency signal from the bracelet on his hand, and an instant warning was received that the heart rate was 180 beats per minute, and this was life-threatening, and it was recommended to stop physical activity. The bracelet on his arm made constant sounds that his heart rate was 192 beats, 195 beats, 200 beats, after which the guy thought that he could no longer breathe. And there was only 1 minute left until the end of this game, and he was in despair. Yu Xiaobei only thought that his sister Xiaoxi was still waiting for him in the hospital, and what would happen to her if he suddenly died. Suddenly, the bracelet made a sound and a warning that the heart rate had exceeded 200 beats per minute, and it initiated the player's system to start. The bracelet made a sound again and sent a notification that the first stage was successfully activated and the skill was reversed, and the player's physical state was restored, and the data states were synchronized, and at the same time all the guy's wounds disappeared, and he thought to himself, "What the hell? This is all happening." The guy looked at the scoreboard and saw that a notification was displayed stating that the heart rate had reached 200 beats per minute, and the reverse skill could now be activated. Activated the reverse mode, allowing him to predict the enemy's movement within 3 seconds. But for this, he had to wait for a cooldown that would last 10 minutes, and after which, using these skills would help significantly increase the likelihood of passing the level. The hero thought that he still had no other choice and would continue to try to fight the bloodthirsty monsters, since there was very little time left to complete the level. Suddenly, a notification arrived that the game would end in 30 seconds, and the hero, as if in a fog, saw 2 monsters jumping towards him. Yu Xiaobei was a little alarmed that the monsters had quickly recovered and were trying to strike again. After activating the system, he could see in 3 seconds what could remain with him if bloodthirsty monsters attacked from behind. Suddenly, he was surprised by what he had just seen. What could happen to him 3 seconds before the attack? And it was incredible. Thinking that based on what he just saw, the monster girl on the right would fall on his shoulder and bite him hard. There were 20 seconds left until the end of the game, and the guy was thinking about how he could hold out. And another monster could pierce his heart, and then he would completely pass out. Suddenly, I thought that in this case, he would act a little differently so as not to expose himself to danger. Yu Xiaobei stood in a different position so that those monsters who wanted to attack him in a jump could not attack him. There were 10 seconds left until the end of the game, and the hero was thinking about how to dodge the blows that could kill him on the spot. The guy began to reassure himself that he was dodging them well and wanted to continue in the same spirit. At the video board, on which the time was displayed with a piercing gaze, there were only 6 seconds left until the end of the game. He thought that he needed to use his skill again, but the prompt on the screen showed that the reverse skill was on cooldown, and the cooldown was only 10 minutes. There were only 3 seconds left until the end of the game. Yu thought about how to reload if the mode should be activated without recharging again. There were only 2 seconds left until the end of the game. Suddenly, a monster was already sitting on his knee, and waving its claw with sharp nails, it wanted to stab him right in the head. There were only 56 seconds left until the end of the game. Suddenly, a gate appeared before the guy's eyes. Having run up, he seemed to have flown through this gate and found himself in a closed room. Reflecting, the hero thought about where this path leads, and if not for the skill that he was given, he could have died. Or maybe it was that game with a higher bonus that Cyborg was talking about. When suddenly information was received that player Yu received a reward of 300 points for this game, and he wondered what this reward was and where it was located. Approaching a door, he thought that there was some unknown room there. When I looked into the room, the hero saw that in fact there were still many players here who were resting after difficult trials with bloodthirsty zombies. The guy raised his hand and saw that his arena bracelet had been activated, and information immediately followed that this is a very smart bracelet that players wear in the arena, which allows them to request personal information, points, tasks, and if the player violates these rules, an explosive device inside the bracelet is triggered. Yu entered the secret room and saw that the same players like him were sitting and standing around the entire perimeter. They were thoughtful and not at all friendly. The guy said that he heard that 20 new players had come today, and one of the guys was looking at him intently. Suddenly, behind the guy, an unknown voice was heard asking why someone survived, while the rest remained forever lying motionless. The hero thought to himself about who they are and why they are all so fierce. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder and said something. Suddenly, a player like him came up to him, said hello, and said that most likely you are new here and wasn't the first game exciting for you. The guy heard such a conversation and thought about something. The unknown man smiled and said that his name was Zhang Ye, and he got here half a month earlier than him, and yet he is a player like me. You thought for a bit. Xiaobei said to himself that these people are also players, but why were we brought here? Suddenly the guy answered him that we'll talk about this somewhere else. Suddenly, the surveillance camera that hung under the ceiling turned towards the guys and began filming their conversation about how it turns out that you also went through a 5-minute test to get here, but none of the players yet knows where this place is. Zhang Ye told the guy that this place is an arena where they hold games for life and death, and does he know about the consortium time? But in response from Yu Bei heard that he works part-time every day and is so busy that he hardly has time to follow the news. And the guy told the hero that he had never heard of such a popular technology company. Its branches are scattered all over the world, its assets can most likely buy up half the planet. And, if you remember, also the development of artificial intelligence. Thinking about this conversation, he remembered that the logo of this company was printed on that mysterious stranger, but he didn't know what time had to do with that place. Zhang Ye pointed to his bracelet where the message had arrived. There was an envelope icon on the bracelet, which means that he received a message about the further course of events in the next game. Suddenly, unexpectedly, he asked what kind of bracelet it was and what its actions were. The bracelet began to emit a blue pulse, and he thought what it was. Suddenly, he saw a blurry image of that little monster and began to stare at it. When the monster had already completely approached him, he began to say that Mr. Yu Xiaobei Welcome to the arena where you will survive together with other players. But there are several conditions. This is the only way to survive and continue to play. The monster hovering in the air told him that as he progressed, he would accumulate points to increase his level. And if he was the last player left, he would have the right to inherit the time company and own huge assets. And the monster smiled and said that there is a special rule. If there is a refusal to play, he will lead you to the treasury and try very hard, and wished him to go only forward for the final prize. Before disappearing, the monster finally told him to consult the beginner's guide inside the bracelet to get more detailed information about the game. The hero heard the words of the monster and constantly thought that huge assets would not interfere with him so that the doctor could successfully perform the operation on his sister. The guy told Zhang Ye that he really thought that he would receive an astronomical amount of money and that it was difficult to even imagine. But he dozed off and said that it could be, but becoming the last player would be very, very difficult. His friend said that there are only 7 ranks and they are now at the lowest. Zhang Ye, holding his head with his hand, said that in order to get this huge fortune, the guy will have to continue to play and accumulate points to increase the further level, and the higher the level, the more difficult the game, and without strength he will not survive. And the whole task is to hold out for 5 minutes. And besides, it's not so easy to accumulate points in the game, his friend said. In this game, points are equal to money, and you just need to buy food and everything else. Zhang Ye went to the machine to choose food. It was compressed cookies and drinking water, and also said that every day food can be bought in limited quantities. And the food is in great demand here, so don't miss it. I also told the guy that the most important thing is not to spend all the points, and if they reach 0, he will be immediately executed. Listening to his friend's conversation, he thought, although the reward is incredibly tempting, he almost died in the first game, and the rules in it are very twisted, and not to mention the fact that his sister is still alone in the hospital. The guy asked Zhang Ye that if he refused, would he be able to leave here? Yu Xiaobei was very worried about the fact that he couldn't eat enough every day, and there were monsters, and he was already losing his mind, and also that this damn bracelet would be taken off him, and he shouldn't be here. And suddenly, a warning came on his bracelet that the player should please remain calm. Suddenly, the guys saw that some player wanted to leave the arena so as not to play, and he was immediately executed, while there was a flash of red liquid. The whole execution took place before the hero's eyes. His friend said that if he refused to be a player, he would have the same end as the one who was executed, and he still had to choose, either accept it or die. The hero thought to himself that that player came out and this happened to him. Zhang Ye told the guy that he must be mentally prepared, and if he is not strong enough, then it will be very, very difficult to play in the future. The guy responded by saying why he talks to him so much and why he, a newcomer, is so interesting to him. A friend said that it never hurts to meet a more powerful player because he watched this game live and at first he thought he was weak, but after he managed to evade the monsters, his opinion changed a lot. When suddenly the guy remembered that it was very close after all, and fortunately, time was running out before the little monster wanted to deal him the final blow. Thinking that surprisingly, he can see the live broadcast of the game, and it is right that fortunately, thanks to this strange system, he avoided disaster. The hero asked his friend what kind of system skill it was, but the answer was that he did not know what a system skill was. Zhang Ye thought about what the guy said. Yu Xiaobei thought that his friend was watching a live broadcast of his game and was not at all aware of the existence of this system. Suddenly, the guy realized that the system was visible only to him, and it was better not to tell anyone about it yet. Suddenly, through the speaker, everyone heard that it was now 19:30 minutes, and there was only half an hour left before the closure of the public area, and everyone was asked to please return to the room before the announcement of the closure of the area. Otherwise, if anyone does not make it in time, the device will execute the offender. All the players gathered again in the large room. Zhang Ye said that the daily work schedule here is from 8 to 20, and the rest of the time you need to stay in the dormitory, and invited the guy to go with him to the cell. The guy agreed with him and said, "Okay, let's go." They walked along a long corridor, and on both sides there were cells, as if in a prison. Walking near the door to the cell, the guy said that since there was no way to leave now, he had to figure out how to survive here. Thoughtful, his friend told him that he was calmer than he thought. A friend told the guy that it took him 3 whole days to come to terms with it. Yu Xiaobei went up to his cell with his friend, and he saw his cell B24, and immediately said that he lived below him and the cell number was B10, and what a coincidence it was. Suddenly, the guys heard over the loudspeaker that there were 5 minutes left before the public area closed, and the players had to return to their dorms as soon as possible. But time was already running out, and they had to hurry. At the same time, the guy's friend quickly ran along the corridor to get to his cell and shouted that if they could meet tomorrow, he would definitely show him all the surroundings. The main character thought that thank God that his friend told him so much, and he could quickly get used to it here. Opening the doors of his cell, he said out loud that he would really live here. The guy looked into the camera and was very surprised. Entering the cell, there were 4 players sitting on the floor, looking at him with a certain grin. When suddenly it was heard from the camera that this was a new guy, and his place was near the toilet. The guy made a bed for himself, lay down on it, and constantly thought about how he should deal with this situation. He couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the fact that his sister was still alone in the hospital, and he had to find a way to somehow get out of here as soon as possible. But first, he needed to familiarize himself with the rules. Remembering what the warning system told him, he raised his hand with the bracelet, and when he pressed it, he saw that there was a guide for beginners, and he was very happy. Waking up in the morning from the fact that a ray of sun was shining into the cell from the window, the guy was a little happy. The beginner's guide read like this: "Good afternoon. I'm a little monster and will see you more than once, and let me tell you this guide, and after you complete the first game, personal points begin to accumulate. In this case, every day at 0, 100 points will be automatically debited as a fee for accommodation in the arena. And if his score is 0, then this means that he has lost the right to survival, and as a result will be immediately destroyed." The system notified him that his current level is Tongshen, and after gaining 10,000 points, he will be able to challenge the boss to move to the next level of Shukai. The guy thought that 10,000 points to increase his level, but at the same time, he received only 300 points for today's game. And from them, 100 points will be deducted later for accommodation fees. Suddenly, a message came out that the arena will place different monsters, and these are beginner, intermediate, and advanced, in each game to personally interact with the players. Also, the standard difficulty of the game gives 300 points per round, and the higher the difficulty, the more points you earn. Suddenly, he received a notification on his wristband that he had been warned and must play at least 1 game a day, or be disqualified, or pay a 500-point fine to avoid a similar fate. He thought that from now on, he would have to face these monsters every day. The guy set himself up and quietly said that if he wants to survive, he must become stronger and defeat the monsters in every round. Then he will get a lot of points. Suddenly, a recording appeared on the screen in front of the guy that he has an unread message. Phew, he said that this monitor scared him a little. The notice sounded like the system would help players become stronger, but they just needed to undergo training. The players' training was that they have to keep an eye on the timer, and when the system opens a time-limited and training field, they will help the players improve their skill and will be rewarded with points upon completion. Opening his mouth, The guy thought that this would not only make him stronger, but would also give him points. And would everything really be that good? After that, he thought about it. Suddenly, the guy woke up in some room unknown to him, but it was definitely not a dormitory. Suddenly, on the screen, he saw an inscription that this was game training, and given that games for the players were held daily in the arena, simulation training was also being conducted to help them improve their skills. The next mission requirement stated that he needed to survive for 5 minutes. This is the novice level of monsters, and after that, he would have 100 points deducted if he failed. And a hint was given that in training field mode, monsters do not cause real damage to the player. The guy shuddered again and said to himself that it was another game with them. There were a lot of players in a huge secret room. Leaving the room, the hero's friend said that he was not in the dormitory, and he looked for him for quite a long time, but still did not find him. Zhang Ye found today's game and stared at it. He watched the game and thought that the guy had to survive to die, and he probably already had 2 strokes after that. Thinking about what to do next, he looked with surprised eyes, and suddenly someone's body flashed through the huge doors, and it was impossible to see it. Having walked out of the door, the guy rushed along the corridor. Suddenly, Zhang Ye saw Yu Xiaobei and shouted, "Hi, bro, here we are again, and we met together, and you probably really started the game so early that I couldn't find you." In response, he said that he wanted to quickly get used to the local rhythm, and in fact, he just wanted to know whether yesterday's training from the system was useful. The guy said that when the simulation started, those 2 monsters started chasing him like in the game. And even if you know that the monsters are fake, the feeling of anxiety that he felt was no less real. Perhaps it was the intense training that was why he got caught, and how fast they became was a mystery to him. He looked very tired, and the system gave information that if the simulation was not completed, the player would pay 100 points as punishment, but the points were not deducted since the simulation was not completed, and the system would reopen the basic training. As in another, the system sent a message again stating that the time limit would be 3 hours, and if the conditions were not met, the points would not be deducted again. Holding his hand on his shoulder, he thought that good basic training, the monsters were like real ones, and he could hear pain as always. It turns out that even if he did not complete the training in the simulation, he can still become stronger through practice. Suddenly, the system sent another message that practice was learning a basic technique, jumping from a fixed point, forward somersault, rolling on the ground. The hero tried these exercises more than once, but after falling more than once, it was really difficult to do this. After long and numerous training, the hero finally managed to master these artificial techniques. Yu Xiaobei, completely exhausted from training, fell onto the bed and froze motionless. He raised his hand, looking at the bracelet, and thought that time flows differently now. After the morning game, he was confident that systematic training would really help him improve his skills. Zhang Ye approached the guy and said, "Come with me, I'll take you with me." The guy thought about it and told him to wait 1 more minute. Telling his friend about how there was only 1 game per person per day, and would he be able to go again? To which his friend shouted that he was out of his mind, and if he restarted the game, the difficulty would increase, and at the same time he had already spent a lot of energy and still wanted to play again, most likely he was tired of life. A stranger passing nearby said that this newcomer had not yet died, and his friend also said that it was unlikely that anyone would be able to survive this game more than once. The guy smiled and said that the difficulty of the game will increase, and this is what is needed, and if it is really that dangerous, you just have to use your skills. The main character thought that 1 game a day, and the points accumulate for too long, so he needs to play a lot every day, and he still has strength, so he would like to try again. The guy's friend said out loud that he was very lucky to survive in such a game, and how he dared to do it again, how arrogant it was on his part. I heard such a conversation about myself. The guy didn't even want to talk to him and went his way. He walked into the corridor where there was a large gate, and the guy thought about what to do next. Looking at the metal doors, they were closed and automatically opened when the player started the game. The guy still couldn't shake the thought of playing at least twice a day. Yu Xiaobei stood in front of the automatic gate and heard the system pronounce the command that today's game has been completed by one player of the main difficulty, and the game is about to begin. And again, the difficulty of the game increases, and it's just 1 star, just 2 stars. The hero thought whether it was worth the risk to increase his level. And standing near the gate, they suddenly opened, while the guy was thinking that if he was a beginner, he would be given 2 stars. But the system, after analyzing the situation, replied that the player should immediately enter the room and stand up because the game would now begin. Looking around, the guy saw the door open and some player ran in from the game and, screaming that he was dying, fell right in the corridor. Not an acquaintance who participated in the game screamed in unbearable pain, and his right hand and several fingers on his left hand were torn off, and red liquid ran from there. Suddenly, the guy thought about how badly he had been beaten, and it was very interesting what difficulty he had in the game. Unexpectedly, he said that thanks to the simulations and physical training done yesterday, running and dodging during the morning game was not as difficult as yesterday. It turns out that it doesn't matter if the difficulty of the game increases a little, the hero thought. Yu Xiaobei said out loud that he needed to try harder to score more points. Suddenly, a command came for the guy to enter the room. Entering the room, he saw a pool of boiling water that was bubbling violently and wondered what it was. How could he walk along it? Because the hero only had sneakers on his feet. The guy opened his huge eyes and didn't understand how he would fight them. Seeing the huge pool, I thought that this is what the playground has turned into. Everything is completely different, and it's not at all like what it was before. Standing in front of the pool, the guy still couldn't think that there was water here. It didn't look like there was any at all. Suddenly, the system informed him that the task was to survive for 5 minutes and kill at least 1 monster. Shouting loudly that this time you need to kill the monsters in a certain time or whatever, the guy said. The system notified him that the difficulty of the game had increased, so players should beware of the pool, and now not with water, but with sulfuric acid. Suddenly, the time switched on the board, and the game began, and now there was sulfuric acid in the pool, and if he fell, then he would be ruined, and the monsters were already beginning to approach. Suddenly, the guy saw the monster and thought that they also looked different than what they were before. The monster jumped towards him and tried to swing its claw to hit him. Feeling the hard surface under his feet, he decided that he could not stand still. Seeing that the monster was almost a meter away from him, the guy rushed at high speed in the other direction to avoid a collision with it. Running along the path, he thought about how not to fall into the pool with sulfuric acid. Having stepped onto the path with 1 foot, he was now worried more than the monster. This was a dangerous field. Suddenly, Yu Xiaobei saw that the road was blocked in front and behind him, and the monsters wanted his red liquid. Thinking about the fact that last night he trained point jumps over similar distances, and now he should be able to do it. Sitting a little on his feet, he decided to act. Pushing off with his feet, the guy flew into the air at such a speed that he himself did not even expect. Time still counted down the minutes and did not stand still. Keeping his balance on his feet, he just needs to dodge, and this way he can survive until the end of the game, but to get points, he needs to kill these nasty little freaks. Suddenly, he thought that how can he kill monsters with his bare hands, because it is too difficult, and you need to be very careful not to fall into a pool of sulfuric acid. And yet, the guy did not believe that the pool was filled with sulfuric acid. And the monsters kept taking off and flying over the hero, circling and catching the right moment when they could attack him. Yu Xiaobei decided to activate the system skill and while he was dodging both scoundrels, he would take one and throw him into the pool with sulfuric acid. The guy himself didn't know if he could withstand two monsters, and looking at them, he thought that he needed to quickly activate the skill. Suddenly, the system notified the hero that his pulse was less than 200 beats per minute, and the conditions for activating the reverse skill were not met. Flying up headfirst, the hero said that his pulse does not reach 200 beats per minute, and this is because he is not as scared as he was yesterday. Suddenly thinking, he changed his trajectory over and over again so that the monster's attacks could not reach him, and if he could not dodge normally, he would most likely die here. Yu Xiaobei remembered that his pulse was more than 200 beats when the monsters gnawed his body with their teeth in the last game, and he realized how he could raise his pulse now. The monster flew towards him and waved its claws and long claws, and its eyes sparkled like red lanterns. Suddenly, red liquid sprayed out. The guy deliberately positioned his shoulder so that the monster would bite him a little, and at the same time, he thought that all that was left was to avoid getting mortally wounded. Suddenly, an SMS message appeared on his bracelet saying that his heart rate was 180 beats per minute and that this indicator had reached a dangerous value, and the player was advised to stop physical activity. The monster smelled the red liquid and was getting closer and closer, trying to attack the guy with its teeth. And the bracelet again emitted a notification that the heart rate was 190 beats per minute and the indicator had reached a dangerous value. Cold sweat ran down his face, and he quickly looked at the bracelet, where his pulse was rapidly increasing, and he urgently needed to hurry. He was writhing in severe pain, and his heart rate was already 195 beats per minute. The guy gathered all his strength into a fist, and bending down, saw on the bracelet a message that his heart rate had reached 200 beats per minute, and the sleep asleep skill was now available. The exhausted hero shouted in a strong voice that it was good that he had time, because using the reverse skill allows you to predict the movement of opponents within 3 seconds. The hero saw the trajectory of his attack. Suddenly, he saw the trajectory the monsters would take in order to finally put him down on the spot and leave him motionless. He only had one chance left, and he had to kill the monsters while the skill was still active, and there was only one chance. He realized that these two monsters tend to kill only by striking them in the face. And the guy thought that the moment he dodges their attack is the best time to counterattack. Suddenly, the hero had the idea that he must lead the monster to the edge of the bridge in order to throw him into sulfuric acid. Most likely, right now, he will perform his signature trick. Suddenly, the monster accelerated and wanted to attack the guy in a jump, but he, knowing about his action, dodged and passed under him and remained standing on the bridge. The main character, in a jump, dealt a fatal blow to the monster, and he fell straight into the sulfuric acid, screaming and screaming. The guy looked with relief at the bloodthirsty monster, who practically began to disappear in the acid. He remembered that the goal of this mission was to destroy at least one monster, and at the same time survive for 5 minutes. Falling onto the bridge after a strong takeoff, he could not resist and hung with one hand while sulfuric acid raged under him. Very frightened, he thought that if he couldn't cope, then he would have to swim in a pool with sulfuric acid. Holding on to the bridge, he gathered all his strength and thought about how not to fall into the pool of acid. With difficulty, he climbed onto the bridge, red liquid ran down his hand, and from excess strength he knelt. And at that time, the last monster appeared in front of him and had to be neutralized. Looking at the scoreboard, he saw that there were only 2 minutes left until the end of the game. Suddenly, he saw that his wound continued to bleed, and he wondered if he could hold out for this time. Raising his head, he heard that she was very dizzy. Everything was swimming in his eyes, and this was most likely the end. Suddenly, the system sent a notification that the player can use points to improve. This is to reverse level 1 and reverse level 2. Suddenly, he crouched down and activated the reverse level and was determined to put this damn monster down forever. Unexpectedly, the system informed him that the player can use points to upgrade the reverse skill, and after leveling up, the skill's duration will be updated. But this upgrade requires 300 points. Suddenly, the guy came up with the idea that when activating the reverse skill upgrade, you need 300 points for one upgrade. And yesterday, the system took as many as 100 points for failing a training mission, and in the middle of the night, automatically deducted another 100 daily survival points. Looking at his bracelet, he saw that for the game he played today, he received only 400 points. Sitting down on the bridge, there was only one thought in his head. After the upgrade, the activation conditions decrease, just like the reload time, while the wound was still bleeding, and in his current state, there was no way he could hold out until the end of the game. Suddenly, on the bracelet, he read a message that the update was confirmed, and he had no other choice but to do it. The system again announced that the condition of using a heart rate of 160 beats per minute will allow you to predict the enemy's movement within 5 seconds. And if the player successfully dodges all enemy attacks during this time, he will receive a buff that increases movement speed for 2 minutes. Thinking, the guy stood and heard a system alert that the skill increase was completed, the duration of the action was updated, and a successful deflection gives him 2 minutes of increased speed, and this is an additional effect. The guy came up with the idea that if he dodges, he will increase his speed of movement. The monster, without thinking twice, set about its work and in flight wanted to attack him. Taking a fighting stance, the guy thought that this was his only hope for survival in this game. Time did not stand still and went faster and faster. Looking at his hand, the guy was surprised and thought that the reverse level 2 effect was active, and at the same time he began counting down the time for 2 minutes. The monster's claw with huge claws wanted to reach the guy. Seeing that the monster was approaching, the guy instantly moved to the side and thought that his body was so light and his speed really increased much. Taking a runner's stance, he thought about how best to evade the monster. And the guy rushed across the bridge with lightning speed so that the bloodthirsty monster could not attack him. Seeing this, the monster was dissatisfied and, opening its mouth, howled loudly, and its eyes shone like red spotlights. Standing on the bridge, he thought that with a higher speed of movement, it became much easier for him to evade monsters, and if he accelerated a little more, they would not be able to touch him at all. The wounds that were on the guy's body made themselves felt, and if not for them, he would have been even faster. The system notified the guy that the remaining acceleration time was 1 minute 12 seconds. Looked from under his forehead and said a rumor that the system really helps him become stronger, so increasing his skills is worth it, even if he has to spend most of the points. The monster still tried to attack him in a jump with its mouth open. Time did not stand still, but went faster and faster. Suddenly, the monster flew up to the guy, and without thinking twice, he jumped to a high distance and thus saved his life. The system notified the hero that the remaining acceleration time was only 42 seconds, and he needed to move as quickly as possible while there was still some time left. The hero, seeing 2 monsters, said that, "That's all damn monsters. Now, you're not as cool as you were before. The countdown time has expired." He stood on the edge of the river, and the system notified him that the goal of the mission of this game had been completed in full. Bei received a message on his electronic bracelet that he was congratulated on completing the main 2-star game, and he was awarded a reward of 500 points for this. Suddenly, information came over the loudspeaker that the game was over, and he needed to go to the general area. The guy went out into the common area and approached the drawer where the medical supplies were located. Pulling out a first aid kit with medicines and bandages, the guy thought about how to cure himself. Entering the secret room, the guy saw other participants in the game who were resting after the battle and laid out medical supplies. The guy began to bandage his wound on his arm, and it really hurt, and he thought that killing another monster activated a hidden bonus for him. Looking at his electronic bracelet, he saw that he had been awarded a double points card, and the total bonus balance was 580. His wound was bleeding a little, and he had to buy the necessary medicine for 20 points from the machine, and he thought that medicine was not too expensive here. Suddenly, he heard some smells of food. The guy, very much tortured after a difficult battle, said that he was very hungry and had not eaten anything since yesterday. Looking around, the hero began to look for his friend Jiang Ye, but he was not. It was although he said that he would wait for him. He went to the machine and thought that he needed to buy something to eat. The guy walked near the machine and saw how other players walked past him and didn't even say hello. He glanced sideways at one of the players. When suddenly one is not an acquaintance passing by, the hero said that the guy who was passing in the corridor really survived and that he had just arrived and was already so arrogant. The stranger said out loud that he had most likely just finished 2 games and should have a lot of points. He walked up to the food machine and began pressing the keys corresponding to the products. Having pressed the key where the pressed cookies were indicated, there were 0 packs and there were 18 bottles of drinking water in the machine alone. Suddenly, the thought occurred to him that it was not easy to survive here, and he would have to take on more dangerous games if he wanted to quickly accumulate points. After drinking some water, he muttered under his breath that he had to come here early tomorrow to grab some food. Suddenly, 3 unknown people entered the room and looked intently at the guy. One of them shouted to him that if you want to buy cookies, you will have to come not so late because he will always be hungry. Stealthily, one of the 3 voiced out loud that the hero was 18 years old and how many days they thought he could live here. The guy raised his head and told him, "Are you okay? What are you talking about with your tongue?" Laughing maliciously, he replied that he was very hot-tempered. The stranger picked up a pack of cookies in his hands and said that he had several of them at such an attractive price, and he could sell them to him at a price of 400 points per pack. Having thought about this proposal, he said in his mind that you can buy it from the machine for 80, but he wants to sell it to me for 400. He's a lousy speculator. The main character told the stranger that he was not interested in his cookies, and they were too expensive. The strangers did not like this kind of conversation from the guy, and they surrounded him from all sides. Thinking about what they needed from him, he looked at them intently. The maliciously smiling kid said that he had to buy cookies from them for 400 points in order to leave here safe and sound, and if he made friends with them, they would cover for him every day. Following the hero, the sneaky kid shouted that if he plays 2 games a day, he should score enough points. Thinking about this, he said to himself in his mind that he had just arrived, and did he really need to bother with them already? But if he gave in to them at least once, then they would not lag behind for a long time. Hugging the guy by the throat with a tighter hand, the stranger said in a quiet voice that if he didn't buy him, they would have to break his leg. In a malicious voice, the stranger told the guy what to do with him so that he would learn to bow to the strongest. Otherwise, he would not survive here. He also said that according to the rules of the arena, they cannot kill him, but there are other ways. When suddenly the stranger flashed his vile eyes and thought that how could a person with a broken arm or leg survive in this game? Another guy said that there is no point in talking to him if he doesn't agree and doesn't understand what we want to convey to him. Leave him and let's go. The nasty stranger took the guy by the cheek and said that he was repeating the last time so that he would give him points, and his patience was running out. Thoughts arose in the guy's head that if he were not alone, then there would be no problems. But there are 2 more, and should he really endure this? The boy extended his bracelet to the hero's bracelet and said, "Yes, they match. Give me your points." Only 2 bracelets came close to one another. Information was displayed that the transaction information had been identified. With a malicious smile, the stranger told the guy that he was a very good boy. Without thinking twice, the hero gathered all his strength into his fist and hit him on the head with lightning speed, so that the stranger almost lost consciousness. The guy hit him again, and he fell to the ground, and red liquid came out of his mouth. Biting his tongue, the stranger lay on the floor and did not remain silent. The main character stood and looked at the cunning stranger and told him, "I won't give you any points, and whoever touches me with even a finger will deal with me. And in order to survive together, where the strong eat the weak, you need to hold on until the end, and his self-confidence can raise the other too." The guy thought that what was the point of playing a lot if some complete idiots would take away the points? Lying on the floor with a broken face, the offended stranger said a rumor that this guy really doesn't understand that I really want to kill him. The offended stranger shouted to his accomplices to attack and kill him. While the guy was fighting off the stranger's friends, 2 outside players thought that it was Ao Hai, and he had his eyes on the new guy again. Seeing such a picture, his friend Zhang Ye looked at the guy being beaten by others, turned away, and did not even defend him. With shouts, the stranger's accomplice shouted that he did not know why the system chose him, but turning into a coward is not what the system wants. The hero instantly hit him in the stomach with his fist and said that even if there were many of them, he still had a chance to win. He looked at his electronic bracelet on his arm and thought that if he could dodge most of the attacks before his heart rate dropped, which was currently 124 beats. Having dodged the enemy's blow, the guy stood on his feet and considered the further option of attack. Suddenly, there was a blow, and the guy tried to fight it off with both hands and thought that what a strong blow had overtaken him. Suddenly, the enemy saw that the hero's left hand was bandaged from the monster's blow, and grabbing it tightly, began to attack him. The enemy shouted to the guy that he was in pain and let him give up. The guy screamed in severe pain, as if his arm had been torn off. The enemy swung his fist and hit the hero right in the head, shouting that he was rubbish and how dare he joke with them. After such a blow, the guy fell to the floor and his arm hurt badly. The guy was surrounded by his friends, and one shouted that he was a bastard, and they would see where his arrogance would lead. The stranger, whom the hero almost knocked out, called his friends and shouted that hold him and break his leg. With a malicious smile, the stranger's friend came up and told the hero which leg to break, right and left. Closing his hand in a fist, the guy thought that his body seemed to be falling apart, and his heart rate was 152 beats, and this was not enough to activate reverse. Hanging his head, the guy thought that he was still too weak and could not believe that he was knocked down with one blow. Having risen to his feet, the guy stood in front of the big guy and looked at him intently. But he thought that even in this case, he couldn't just give up. The big guy raised his huge leg and shouted that the guy should not dare to get up because he would break his left leg. The system notified the hero that the heart rate had reached 160 beats per minute and the reverse level 2 skill was available. And also, using the skill reverse level 2 allows you to predict the movement of opponents within 5 seconds. Now, the guy was able to predict any actions of the big guy who wanted to break his leg. The main character raised his head when he saw the enemy's movements, which he could have predicted in advance. The system notified the hero that he successfully dodges, and the reverse level 2 effect is activated, and the player receives an acceleration for 2 minutes. The big guy decided to attack the guy and took a running start and decided to pounce on him, but the guy who knew his move in advance slipped under him. Having crashed to the floor, the big man looked at him with surprised eyes and did not understand how this happened, and the guy swung his hand at him with lightning speed. With a strong blow of his hand, the guy hit his opponent on the head and he fell screaming. The guy's opponent fell to the floor hitting his head, and wondered why he suddenly became so fast. Running with all his might, one of the three attackers wanted to attack the guy from behind and thought that this couldn't happen. It shouldn't be like this, that we lost. The hero thought that he did not have time to wait, and he needed to kill this attacker on the spot as quickly as possible. The stranger, whom the guy had already attacked, wanted to hit him in a jump, but shouted that he couldn't either, because he was very fast. The guy activated his power and thought that he needed to kick him urgently. Swinging his leg, the guy attacked the enemy with a strong blow. After the blow, the stranger was thrown a long distance, and he crashed to the floor and groaned heavily. From severe pain, the stranger raised his head and shouted in a voice that was not his own that he had killed all three of us on the spot. The hero walked a short distance and shouted to the stranger who was lying on the floor about how you told me there. Which leg should I break, or is it better to break my skull? The guy said with a smile. Lying on his stomach, the stranger shouted about how dare he touch him, and in general he knew who was behind him. The guy told the stranger that he was threatening him again, and if he was so afraid of death, he would get it. The hero stepped with his foot right on his face, and he screamed in pain to let him go, and he would give him the cookies. The guy had a thought pop into his head. The stranger, lying on the floor, thought that he was most likely wrong and lay motionless. He said that you are not worth it for me to break the rules of my valuable life. Leaning towards, not the guy picked up the cookie to an acquaintance and said that this was probably compensation for the fact that I was messing around with you. From afar, his friend Zhang Ye saw this whole situation and thought that he was still an amazing guy, but unfortunately he was in trouble now and he should probably wait before calling him. Two players passing by saw that the guy was carrying cookies and thought that if they understood correctly, then he squeezed the cookies from Ao himself. Hainya, and isn't he afraid of the consequences? The stranger stood up and shouted in a voice that was not his own. You Xiaobei, I remembered you. There was silence on the second floor, and only the sun's rays made their way from the cells through the bars. The guy remembered the cookies that he put in his pocket. The main character was very hungry because he had not had anything in his mouth for almost a day, and while trying the cookies, he thought that most likely he would try to take revenge on him for what happened today. Suddenly, the guy said that it doesn't matter, and he doesn't regret it. And suddenly a message came on his bracelet saying that your points ranking has changed. Please click on the forum panel to view the leaderboard. The guy thought that he had entered the leaderboard and needed to study it. The players' ratings were updated in real time, and he wanted to see where he stood. After scrolling through the table, the guy saw that he was in 276th place, and at the same time he had 580 points. He was interested in how many points the player in first place had. Flipping through the table, he was surprised that in the first rows, there were people who had more than 5,000 points. In first place, according to the table, was Zhao Xifang, who had about 10,000 points and almost succeeded. The hero couldn't believe his eyes and stared at the table. He saw in third place in the table that stranger who was trying to pester him to buy cookies. That stranger's name was Ao Haijin. The hero was surprised. Everything seems a little complicated, the guy thought. As a friend, the guy thought that if he wanted to know more, the best way would be to ask directly, and he approached camera B10. The guy started knocking on the metal door and calling his friend Zhang Ye, but from there he heard that they would wait because they were playing cards. The camera that stood under the ceiling began to film all the guy's actions. His friend Zhang Ye came out of the cell, greeted the guy and said, "At least you didn't get poisoned by these cookies. I saw with my own eyes how you laid him down." Zhang Ye constantly looked around, now to the right, now to the left, as if he was afraid of something. A friend told the hero that he was in great danger because Ao Haijin and Ao Haiyan are two siblings who want to take revenge on him. The guy remembered that Ao Haijin was in third position in the standings, and he is very strong. Zhang Ye told him that the power in her hands is much more dangerous, and at our level, there are some players in order to reduce the mortality of advanced games. The friend also said that they were divided into 30 players and 3 teams. They played in groups and sold cookies at high prices. And this is Zhao Xifang, Li Changsheng, and Ao the Haijin were the captains of these teams, and they are all very strong. Zhang Ye said that low-level players like us can only survive thanks to them, and he feels that the 2 brothers will not give up so easily. The hero's friend whispered that he originally wanted to make him take photos of the team and make a plan of action, but now it's a little risky. Yu Xiaobei thought that apparently he had no choice, and if he couldn't save the points, he had to end the game. Suddenly, Zhang Ye remembered that he had not played today, and therefore he had to run, shouting to the hero as he went that, in any case, he was taking care of himself and let him find him if he still had any questions. He listened to his friend and thought that if he became number 1, would there be anyone who would dare to provoke him? After 3 days, something unusual happened. Walking along the corridor, the main character saw those 3 friends who were discussing something. The players saw the guy, and one said to the other that this kid is gaining points as quickly as he can, and he has only been here for a few days, but he has already accumulated 2,000 points. That stranger, whom the guy almost knocked out, shouted to the guys that no matter how capable he would not be able to survive to the end, and that they should not pay attention to him and should not drag them into trouble. Walking down the corridor, he thought that no one had bothered him once in the last 2 days, and this was even very strange, considering that he had no time to think about it. The guy talked about how, in order to quickly gain points, he forced himself to play 2 games a day. The table looked like this. The main character was in 191st place, while he had 2,180 points. Yu Xiaobei thought that using the virtual training system had a good effect on his physical training, and now he could easily pass the main level. Walking along the corridor, he thought that there was no sunlight, no exit, and the change of day and night was artificially simulated. Having learned that in addition to bedrooms and common areas, there was also a fitness room and a bathhouse, and it is not surprising that all this can only be used for points. The guy was thinking that 5 days had already passed since he got here, and he was starting to lose track of time. And only by playing non-stop and watching his points continue to grow did he feel alive. The hero came and told himself that this room was behind a mid-level game. He stood near the entrance to the huge door. By holding out his hand with the bracelet, the system notified him that a check was underway. A player who meets the requirements for participation in the game of an intermediate, complex level can pass. Suddenly, doors began to open in front of him. Upon entering the corridor, the system notified him that only players with more than 2,000 points could participate in the intermediate game, and the reward for an intermediate game with 1 star was 1,000 points. The hero thought that although the difficulty level of the game had increased, it could be played as a team, and the speed of completion should increase. Looking at the bracelet, he saw that he was being invited to play on the average difficulty level of 1 star and was asked to choose the team method. Thinking that in order to earn a lot of points, you need to team up with someone you know. On the electronic bracelet, the random match function was highlighted, where it was said that the game mates were selected at random, and after the completion of the match, he would go to room 8 of the intermediate game for 5 minutes, and if he did not pass verification in the specified room, then today he would be amber. It is prohibited to participate in all games. Having turned on the random match function, he had to hurry up because time could run out, and he ran to the door. He quickly ran up and saw room number 8 and stopped. Stopping near the door, I thought it should be here. He saw a girl standing near the door, and he became thoughtful. In surprise, he quietly said under his breath that these were his teammates. Hearing the guy mutter, the girl turned to him and gazed into his eyes. And an intermediate game appeared on the screen in front of them, where players must score more than 2,000 points. And after passing verification, they will be able to go to the intermediate platform to start the game. Further events took place in the fitness room, where the stranger shouted to his brother that he urgently needed to take revenge on Bei. The stranger told his brother that he understood that he had been playing games with a high level of difficulty for 2 days in a row, and he didn't want to bother him over trifles. But this guy completely mixed up the waters. He not only beat you, but also took your cookies. The brother put down the barbell he was working on and said that we should take revenge on him. After training, my brother sat down on the table and thought about something. He told Hein that he knew what he was thinking, and would he dare to take my supplies based on your words? Looking at his brother, he said, we should teach him some manners. The main character approached the girl and thought about how to speak to her first. The guy said, so you are my new teammate, and that he is very happy, and his name is Bei. The girl said that her name was Zhou, and it was time for them to start the game before it was too late. The guy got the idea that women here also play games, but he had never seen them before. In a sweet voice, the girl told him that men and women live in different areas and only meet in intermediate and advanced games. Joe thought that he was just starting to play, and most likely he was an inexperienced player. The guy thought that it was a coincidence that it was impossible to determine the strength of a teammate, but the girls who were able to survive in such an environment were definitely not weak. The girl's bracelet received a message that she should be the first to launch the game. Just don't get in my way, the girl said to the hero. Information appeared on the board that all players had passed authentication and invited them to enter the game. Entering the huge hall, they saw something and thought about it. With surprise, the guy answered the girl, what kind of monster this is? Suddenly, they saw a puppet standing with its dolls. The puppet seemed to be scanning the entire room with its head, and the laser beams glowed in the darkness. She had palms sticking out of her skull, which seemed to radiate electrical energy. The girl saw all this and said, it's definitely a puppet. The puppet emitted pulses in the form of laser beams, and 2 huge dolls stood protecting it. The guy told the girl that it was somehow strange that they were inviting us, but when he heard the answer, he heard that the game had not started yet, so they would not attack us for some time. Suddenly, an information message came that players were welcomed by a game of medium difficulty 1 star, and its goal was to capture the puppeteer's props within 20 minutes. And for this, there would be a reward of 1,000 points per person. And also heard a hint that it is necessary to take the only correct doll out of 2, which is located around the puppeteer's waist. And if there is a wrong choice, a random fine will be imposed. The guy was thinking about how to distinguish the right props from the wrong ones, but the girl told him that first he needed to find a way to get closer to the puppeteer, and only then figure it out. The candle that stood on the tripod went out, and this was a sign that the game had begun. The puppeteer's puppets began to run at great speed towards the guy and girl while waving steel swords. The hero shouted that they had knives in their hands, and they had to be very careful, but the girl shouted in response that let's distract them first. The guy saw a sharp knife in front of him and, gritting his teeth, thought about how to dodge. Suddenly, he saw a huge, sharp knife flying straight into his body. He began to dodge such a strong blow, but the sharp one touched him a little, after which the knife hit the floor with great speed and got stuck there. Seeing that the hand was a little battered and red liquid was coming out, he shouted to the girl that this knife was very sharp. Running away from such a blow, I thought that this was not as good as I would like, but first I needed to dodge. Otherwise, he would be finished. Seeing such a sight, the girl thought of something. She jumped with her right hand and delivered a lightning strike right to his head. The puppet still managed to cut off a tuft of hair from the girl's head with his sharp knife. I thought that this was happening faster than she expected. But the puppet still continued to wave two sharp knives, dodged the blows of the knife while jumping, and tried to deliver a fatal blow. The guy tried to hide behind a concrete column and hid. Seeing the guy, the puppet destroyed everything that came in his way with his sharp knife. All he could think about was that they had to get rid of the puppet first. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get to the puppeteer himself. Grabbing his chest, he heard a small but sharp pain where he was slightly caught when hit with a knife. He stood in a secluded place to the side while the girl hovered in the air and dodged the blows of the puppet, and he thought to himself that she was really very good. The puppeteer still controlled the puppets with his own hands, dodged the puppet while jumping and tried to somehow neutralize it. The puppet flew high, waving both knives and trying to plunge it into the girl's body, but then something went wrong. Having landed, both knives stuck a centimeter from the girl's leg. The girl looked at the puppet with a menacing gaze, and she had her own plan. The guy saw how the girl barely dodged the blow and shouted after her. He thought that the girl wanted to take advantage of this gap to grab the doll. She was already almost a few meters away from the puppeteer. The girl saw that almost two identical dolls were hanging on the puppeteer's belt. The dolls looked like twins, and she thought which one to choose. Suddenly, the guy shouted at her to take this one and pointed his finger at her. Zhou flew into the air with lightning speed, and at the same time, reaching out, she tore the doll the guy was talking about from the puppeteer's belt. A notification appeared on the information board stating that the goal of the game is to capture the puppeteer's details within 20 minutes. The remaining time is 16 minutes, 35 seconds. After the loss of the puppeteer began to intensively control the puppets. The guy thought something and looked sharply. She approached Marinette so easily, as if it didn't bother her at all and it was somehow abnormal. The puppeteer fired webs like laser beams. The puppet tried to get around the girl from behind and strike. The hero shouted with all his might that she should be more careful, and not knowing exactly what was the matter, he had a feeling that everything was not so simple here. The girl heard the guy scream and looked at the puppet and thought about how to avoid him. Flying high, the puppet tried to strike the girl's body. When suddenly Zhao shouted to the guy that the puppets could split into several parts and deliver fatal blows. She tore off her clothes and came up with something. The girl wanted to perform a distracting maneuver by turning her clothes into the image of some kind of player. The puppet, seeing the clothes in the image of the player, plunged his knife into it with lightning speed. Seeing this, she shouted to the guy that when the puppets are separated, the intensity of their attacks increases significantly. Half of the puppet's body was flying in the air with one knife and was trying to find its victim. The girl stood, and behind her lurked a stub of a puppet with a knife in her hands, and, with one blow, hooked the torso and struck. The guy saw the girl and shouted that she was wounded and red liquid was running from her. Crouching on the floor in severe pain, the girl looked around so that the pieces of the torso would not strike her again. A hand with a sharp knife lay on the floor, without signs of life. The hero saw that the girl now needed his help, and she would not be able to dodge this blow. She raised her head and saw a sharp knife with a severed hand flying straight into her body. Squinting one eye, the girl thought about how to avoid a collision. The guy flew up in the air with lightning speed and kicked a sharp knife out of a piece of his hand, which then flew away in an unknown direction. Landing after the impact, he saw that the girl was safe, and he was very happy about it. Having asked that she could hold out a little longer, he looked in her direction. She replied that she was fine. There was only 14 minutes and 17 seconds left in the game. The guy hugged the girl, stood in the middle of the room, and thought about a single plan to neutralize the puppets. Joe thanked the guy for warning her in time, otherwise, the puppets would have killed her. The guy and the girl stood back to back, and he said that the puppeteer himself was not very strong. And in response, he heard that she also had a little plan. The girl said that the two puppets he controls are very cunning, and since the game is designed for two players, two must play it, and we cannot die. She held her breath and thought about something. Suddenly, the puppeteer launched an unknown weapon, and the guy shouted to the girl to be careful. Suddenly, sharp knives flew near the guy and girl, and he thought about how it works and what they should do with these puppets. He thought that if he cut the thread, then they would stop moving, and he needed to use the knife they had in their hand to do this. The girl said that it was easier said than done. They were not eager to help, and he said that first, you need to make the puppet with two knives run to the left. The hero replied that he would lead the puppet by the thread, and so that at the right moment, she could cut the thread with a knife. Suddenly, the guy rushed up and shouted that as soon as we do this, we'll immediately run after the doll, and the remaining puppets should not interfere with us. The guy stood rooted to the spot. Suddenly, he saw a knife flying in his direction, and with a sharp movement of his body, he froze in place. Shouting in a loud voice to the girl that she should freeze for a few seconds, and at the same time not attack him, and he could not be allowed to be separated. Yu Xiaobei decided to mislead the puppet with the girl in order to cut its strings with a knife. The girl distracted the puppet, and the guy decided to help her to make it easier to neutralize it. The guy said to himself that that's all, the rest depends only on them. Suddenly, the guy saw a puppet in front of him with a sharp knife in his hands and ducked down to avoid the blow. Having dropped to his feet after a short jump, he saw that a sharp knife had cut the puppet's strings. The girl saw the puppet fall to the floor without signs of life and thought that their plan had worked. She shouted to the hero that they need to pick up the doll now while they have the opportunity. The guy heard the girl's words and tried to dodge the puppet in order to get closer to the puppeteer. While jumping, the guy wanted to tear the doll from the puppeteer's belt, but something went wrong. I saw something there and seemed to be scared. Suddenly, the puppet struck his shoulder with a sharp knife, and he thought that the thread was restored very quickly. The puppeteer, having restored the strings again, began to direct the puppets so that they would hit their target forever. The girl thought that she now needed to tear the doll off the puppeteer while there was still a small opportunity. The puppet, thinking something, stood on its feet without moving. The guy gathered all his strength into a fist and thought about what to do. The hero decided that by clinging to one of the puppets, he would hold her back so that the girl could run up to the puppeteer without hindrance. Seeing this, the girl began to approach the puppeteer with lightning speed. The wounds that were on her body did not give her peace, but she strived for her goal. At great speed, the girl flew in a jump, clutching the puppeteer's belt, tearing the doll from there in order to quickly finish this game. The girl screamed that she only took one doll and immediately saw that the puppets stopped moving, which means the game was completely over. Suddenly, the information system issued a message that player Joe had taken the wrong item and warned that the doll was about to explode as punishment. The system notified the hero that he must choose one of two. If he continues the game with a teammate, he must take the correct props, and if successful, he will be awarded points and save his teammates. And if unsuccessful, he will explode or immediately end the game and calmly leave the game room. The guy thought that players who took the wrong item were punished, and besides, the girl's life depended on his choice. The girl told the guy that she couldn't take off this doll. The girl looked at the guy with a quick glance, and his reaction about whether he would continue the game or not. The hero's wound was very painful after the last game, and he thought that if he just left without scoring a single point today, it would be a huge loss. But is it worth putting his life on the line again for 1,000 points? Although they already know which doll is correct. The guy was thinking that the puppet's strings were restored too quickly, and it was quite risky to rely only on the string idea to capture the puppet. He said to himself that if they lose, they will fly up into the air, and the doll is most likely uncontrollable than explosive. The guy thought that he was afraid that if something happens, she will get into trouble again, and if she also dies, then there will be nothing left, while he is not in the best shape now, and in the future he will have even more opportunities to win. Stretching out his hand on which the bracelet hung, the hero pressed the button to end the game. The girl stood, looked at him, and thought that whether she could survive or not depended on what he chose, and they should not miss this chance. Screaming, the girl told him that she had a very rare bonus card, and if he did not finish the game, she would give it back. She told the guy that she had already used hidden bonuses in the game and saw that he also had something similar. And if he wanted to continue, then this card would help him beat games of higher difficulty. The girl showed a bracelet where it was written that after use, you will have the right to purchase weapons, and weapons are only possible for advanced games or daily use. The guy thought about the fact that he already had such a hidden bonus for doubling points in the last game, and it looks really tempting, and he still has systematic skills that can be useful to him in the fight. She told him that if he decides to stay, he can ask her for anything, and after thinking, he replied that if he stays, he risks exploding with her, but most likely this is not enough. But the guy told her that, in addition to this bonus card, he also wanted 500 points. He looked at her intently and thought that if after the game she didn't give me all this, she would definitely regret her mistake. Hearing this answer, she replied, "So you will stay, and when the game is over, I will give you everything you want." She told her plans about wanting to grab a knife to then cut the thread. The guy thought to himself that it's not so easy to grab a knife. Okay, let's see. Hearing the girl's conversation, he said that this time we would not cut the thread, but the puppeteer's hand. The main character told her that he noticed that the threads that control the puppets come from here, like nerves, and if you don't cut off the hand itself, the threads will grow back again and again. The girl told the guy that if you get rid of the puppeteer's hand, then the puppets will completely lose the ability to attack, because her life is at stake and she will do everything possible to win. By pressing the button on the bracelet, the system notified that player Yu Xiaobei continues the game and it is about to begin. The system notified that the game length has been updated and the time is 3 minutes. They stood alone next to one and thought that 3 minutes of time was very little, and they needed to act quickly because they had changed tactics, and now it would be quite difficult to dodge if they rushed after them. The guy thought that at the beginning of the last round, they immediately attacked them, but now they moved to protect the puppeteer. Looks like they want to catch them. The girl told him that he wanted to grab a knife to cut off his hand, and what would happen if all else failed. The guy saw the fire torch and told the girl to take it. When he takes the torch, he will check the puppet, and if nothing happens, then they have time to react. Looking at his electronic bracelet, he saw that his heart rate was 161 beats per minute. He shouted to the girl to attack from the side and to break away from the puppet with a large knife, and if the puppeteer was not sure, then he would definitely not leave himself defenseless. She looked like a puppet for a guy and a girl. The hero still had a wound on his shoulder, and before that he only had to run and dodge, but now he would be the first to strike. After a lightning strike, the guy cut the puppet's body in half and tried to continue to fight. The system notified the hero that the heart rate reaches 160 beats per minute, and the reverse level 2 skill is available, and using the reverse level 2 skills allows you to predict the enemy's movement within 5 seconds. He thought to himself that he only had 3 ways to attack. The guy predicted all the blows of the puppet and remained rooted to the spot. The puppet's blow missed the silk thread, but fortunately there were other options, he thought. The severed hand with the knife wanted to attack the guy. The guy screamed with all his might for the girl to run to him as soon as she received the torch. Seeing the burning torch, the girl ran towards it. She grabbed a torch with a stand and, taking it by the hand, thought in which direction to run. The puppet, seeing that the girl was running with a torch, without thinking twice, ran after her. The girl screamed, "You shall obey," that she is ready to grab the knife. The stand with the torch lay so close to the thread that the puppeteer controlled. Suddenly, unexpectedly, the fire of the torch burned the threads and they instantly burst. The hero grabbed the hand with the sharp knife and dragged it to the puppeteer. The guy grabbed a sharp knife from the puppet's hand and raised it in front of him. Swinging a very sharp knife, the guy ran up to the puppeteer and tried to attack him. Unexpectedly, the system notified the guy that the player had evaded all attacks for 5 minutes. The reverse effect level 2 was activated, and at the same time he received an acceleration for 2 minutes. Time did not stand still, and everything went forward and forward. The guy shouted at Joe to stop the puppet with the big knife while he dealt with the puppeteer. The system notified that the player is receiving a speed boost for 2 minutes, and the remaining time is 1 minute 52 seconds. Suddenly, the guy rushed away with such speed that the girl herself did not expect it. She saw this and thought in her mind that how did he suddenly become so fast? Almost flying up to the puppet, the guy tried to guess his knife movements. Dodging the blow of the puppet's knife, the guy raised the knife with lightning speed and tried to attack him. With a precise blow of the knife, he cut the puppet's body into 2 parts, after which the halves fell to the floor. The guy saw a huge bundle of threads that were moving towards him, released by the puppeteer. Suddenly, one thread was cut in half right into the handle of a sharp knife, and the guy was very surprised. Yushaobei shouted that the puppeteer wanted to take away the sharp knife from him, and the thread was very strong. The girl also tried to distract and attack another puppet, and he also tried to cut the wooden stick of the puppet with a sharp sword. The guy screamed that he had no choice, because the thread was violently tearing the sharp knife out of his hands, and they should leave everything as it was. He could hardly stand still, rooted to the spot, and his legs seemed rooted to the floor. With lightning speed, the girl jumped straight onto the puppet's neck and began to strangle it with her hands, screaming for the guy to act faster, because she would not be able to control her for so long. The guy, with a strong blow of the knife, cut the stick and threads with which the puppeteer controlled the puppet. He planted his foot firmly on the floor to continue the attack, when suddenly the puppeteer saw a guy in front of him, and with lightning speed he threw the threads straight at him, but he dodged and sharply swung a sharp knife. Before the blow, he gritted his teeth tightly and gathered all his strength. With a sharp blow of the puppeteer's knife, the guy cut off one hand and then the second with threads that flew in different directions. Meanwhile, there are only 21 seconds left in the game. The girl shouted to the guy that it was true that he had neutralized him. The notification system notified that it congratulates the team for completing the task, while the game is over and the bomb is deactivated, and the rewards for this game will be given out soon, and each player in the team will receive 1,000 points. Looking at the girl, he said that now the time had come to fulfill his promise. She happily told him that they survived and not to worry, and would also tell him about the hidden connection between the weapon card and the advanced game. Further actions took place in the gym. In the gym locker room, 2 people stood near the metal boxes and had a conversation about how they had already loaded supplies and didn't know how many days it would take to return from this trip to the front line. A stranger approached his brother in the gym and asked what he needed to do. His brother replied that Chen-sin, we are moving on to the advanced game, and you can guess why you weren't accepted this time. Chen-ching replied that Haiying's cookies were stolen. He replied that Haiyan has no patience, and every day he causes nothing but trouble, and without me he is nothing, but even if he is good for nothing, he is still my brother. The guy who beat up my brother and stole his cookies, he needs to get rid of this annoying problem, Otherwise, I will belittle them even more in the future. Chen Qing told him that he was not worried, and he would correct himself and do everything in the best possible way. In the players' table, Chen Qing was number 7 with a score of 5.362. The program has notified that testing is ongoing, the current environment is safe, and players can voluntarily exchange points and trading privileges are also available. The girl asked the guy, "Have you already received the promised 500 points?" The main character stood with a knife in his hands and said that the transfer of points goes through a large number of stages, and the girl replied that this is being done to prevent the illegal enrichment of players. Looking at the guy, the girl said that, why did he hide his strength? Because then the game could suffer due to overload. Having answered her question that, in any case, this was not enough to finish the game alive, he asked her immediately when she would give him the bonus card, and that it was more important to him than some points. The guy stood opposite the girl and said that she would tell him about the hidden connection between the weapon card and the advanced game, but she replied that she didn't really want to get it when the situation didn't require it. The girl said that let's start with weapons, since only food and medicine are sold at this level, and many players tried to find weapons here, but everything was unsuccessful. She told him that some people had even taken the weapon from the monster, but that it could not be taken out of the playroom. Telling him that after she got the hidden map, she discovered that the weapon was always there. And according to her research, most people do not know that the weapon is available in advanced games. And in fact, there is some kind of information gap. And those who have weapons also have an advantage in the game. The girl told him that he had already received one weapon card. And by the way, would he like to team up again after that? Because she knows a lot of valuable information about the advanced game, and it will definitely be useful to him. She said that next time she would be able to talk about this in more detail. The guy thought that he would wait for her invitation. Actions were already taking place in the corridor. The hero walked along the corridor and thought about something. He thought that the intermediate games were much more difficult, and at his current level, playing twice a day would be quite difficult, and he would most likely need to resume training in the afternoon. Walking along the corridor, several people looked at him, and he thought, why do these people constantly look at him and say nothing? He still continued to move along the corridor and constantly thought about what to do. Suddenly, he heard some steps behind him, literally a few meters away. When suddenly I heard an unfamiliar voice, and that someone was greeting him and calling him by name. Suddenly, someone shouted that, "Let's wake up our baby." The guy was tied with a chain and suspended from the ceiling with his hands up. He opened one eye and saw a huge number of players whom he had once seen but did not even know. Suddenly, Hyen, holding a wooden stick in his hands, shouted that, "Look, he woke up, and wasn't he incredibly cool just a few days ago? And why are you hanging here now?" The hero thought that it was Hyen, and as soon as he finished the game, he was tired and slightly careless, and the unknown guy who was strangling him was unusually strong. Chen Qing told the guy that he heard that you were an arrogant and quite famous person, and he thought that the guy was very influential. He followed him all the way, and he wouldn't have noticed him if they hadn't started strangling him, and stands whether this level of his attention. Ao Hajin told Haijin that he would leave the guy at his discretion and let him do what he wanted with him, since he had more important things to do. The guy's hands were tightly wrapped in a chain, and he was thinking that he needed to find a way to somehow get out of this. Hyen shouted to the guy that he had heard rumors that he had participated in the intermediate game, and his points were quickly accumulating. Leaning over, the hero shouted to him that it is very sad that you are such a pathetic bastard that even without the help of other people, you cannot see me and talk like man to man. Hyen listened to everything the guy said and shouted in anger that how dare he talk to him like that. He would break his leg and force him to eat it. Swinging a wooden stick at the guy's legs, something went wrong. Seeing this, the hero was not taken aback and with lightning speed struck him on the head with a lightning-fast kick, causing sparks to fall from his body. Haiyan, holding his head with his hand, shouted to the stranger that why the hell he was just looking and to go to him and hold him. The guy heard this, and with a sharp kick, he jumped right onto his neck and locked his legs in a hold, shouted to his accomplices that they should not move. If they started helping him, he would strangle him, and still they pushed him to this moment. The hero told him in a quiet voice that if he told them to let him go, and if not, he would keep his word and fucking strangle him. Haiyan's head was already filled with blood, and with the last of his strength, he screamed that quickly, do something, because I'm about to suffocate. His three accomplices gritted their teeth and tried to do something. The guy squeezed his legs even more tightly and thought about what he should do next in this situation. Suddenly, Haiyan showed two fingers with the palm of his left hand behind him, and this was a secret sign to his accomplices. Chen Qing, seeing this sign, shouted that this was Big Brother, so he understood correctly. One accomplice climbed up to remove the chain and lower the guy, said that I would count to 3 and let him go. With the words 3, the chain was removed and he and Haiyan fell down to the floor. Dropping sharply to the floor, the guy pulled the chain towards himself to sweep it towards Haiyan. The guy felt his feet suddenly fall onto the covering, and he stood firmly on it. The guy grabbed the chain with his hand and held it in order to strike back. Having wrapped a chain around Haiyan's throat, he told him that he had already tried to cripple him twice, and that he should not think that he would just let him go. Events continue in the gym. The guy held him with a chain, and his accomplices surrounded them, shouting that he should not play the fool because his brothers were not made of crystal. The hero said that he just wanted to take part in the game and earn enough points, and it was all their fault. He told him that he could not constantly disturb him, and Haiyan asked him to let him go. Seeing the sports equipment behind him, the guy thought that most likely they would fight back with them. The guy thought for a moment. Suddenly, one of this gang grabbed a metal object and wanted to hit the guy directly on the head. The accomplices created a distraction so that the guy would get scared and let Haiyan go. Having dodged the blow, the guy took the chain in one hand and was thinking about what to do now to repel the attack of these accomplices, and heard a cry that whoever breaks his leg will receive 3 packs of cookies. Suddenly, the guy saw one of the gang swinging a metal rod at him, and dodging, he thought about how to attack him. Having gathered all his strength into his fist, the guy struggled to think where it would be better to strike. The hero, swinging his right hand, hit the enemy directly in the ribs with a strong blow, and he screamed loudly in pain. After a strong blow, the guy himself felt how he broke more than one of his opponent's ribs. The guy quickly got into a wrestling stance and looked to see who else was trying to attack him. Suddenly, one of the gang jumped up from behind and swung his stick, hitting the guy right on the head, and a little red liquid ran from him. Without being confused, the guy threw the chain that was on his hand at the enemy, and he screamed in pain in a voice that was not his own. Suddenly, the guy thought that there were many of them, and he was alone, but he would continue the fight anyway. Swinging the chain, the opponents began to back away, realizing that it was they who would take the blow. Gathering all his strength, the guy looked intently at his opponent and thought that there were too many of them, and the situation was really lousy, and if he wanted to be a better player, he must learn to get rid of such garbage. Suddenly, the system notified the guy that his heart rate had reached 169 beats per minute, and the reverse skill level 2 was available. The guy rushed forward to perform the maneuver and heard that, just look at this idiot, there are a lot more of us, but he still wants to fight. The hero decided to use his reverse skills, which allows him to predict the enemy's movement within 5 seconds. Now he saw all the movements of this gang and all their plans to attack him. Gathering his strength, the guy began to strike blow after blow at the attackers and dodge their blows, so that he managed to hit them all one by one. Suddenly, the hero received a message that the player could not evade all attacks and could not activate the reverse effect level 2. One of the gang lay screaming, with red liquid running from his nose. Hyen grabbed some kind of metal wheel and shouted that the guy would not run away from him this time. Seeing this, the guy wondered how he could dodge this blow. Hyen's hands with one kick. The guy hit him with such force that he cried out from the pain in his leg. He waved his hand high. The guy wanted to strike him with a strong blow. And he was lying on the floor and was very scared that he would kill him. With all his strength, the guy stuck his head straight into the floor with his hand. Hyen lay on the floor, writhing in pain, and screamed in a voice that was not his own. The guy stood over him and said that wasn't he the one who tried his best to hurt him when he was tied up with a chain. The guy thought to himself that he would not be able to survive, so the image of the demon should cover his back. For a minute, the hero thought about something. One of the gang grabbed a metal pipe and showed it to the guy, clenching it into a fist. Swinging a pipe at him, the guy grabbed it with one blow and shouted to him that he wanted to die so badly, but he shouted to take Hyen away from here, and if he dies right here, then we are all lost. Without thinking twice, the guy grabbed a dumbbell and with one strong blow hit the stranger right in the ear, after which red liquid gushed out. After which, the stranger grabbed Hyen on his shoulders and dragged him out of the gym in an unknown direction. And the guy looked at this and thought, what would happen next? While running away from the gym, one of the gang turned around and shouted that this guy is so scary and he will kill them all. Let's get everyone out of here quickly. The main character shouted in a loud voice that they should not leave and talk to him. He looked after them, but the wound on his body was making itself felt. Suddenly, he felt a strong pain in his knee and groaned heavily. Screaming that he was in incredible pain, and most likely his leg was broken, and how he even stood on it, and how now he could survive with a broken leg. Conversations could be heard outside the doors of cell B24, and something was happening there. Two of them were sitting in the cell and thinking that it was time for them to get ready, and a game was waiting for them, when the other immediately replied that he had had enough, and this would someday end. Suddenly, they heard some footsteps outside the doors. The door opened, and they saw a hero standing and looking at them with a gaze. The guy stood near the door, holding the doorway with one hand, and said that maybe he would shut up already, and most likely he hadn't been hit in the face for a long time. Suddenly, after the words were spoken, he thought about how they would react to this. Two strangers who were his neighbors in the cell were very confused, and one then said that he should be quieter because they won't last a few days, and so that he doesn't get into trouble again. Coming out of the cell, one player told the guy how unlucky he was that he was sleeping in the same room with him. In the cell, water dripped drop by drop from the tap and made an unpleasant sound. Suddenly, the main character sat down on the floor and thought that he might die due to a broken leg. And if he did not participate in the games, then 500 points would be deducted every day. But they are not endless, and how gang? As soon as the balance is 0, the bracelet will tear his body into pieces. His fist in his hand, the guy thought about how he could get here. He imagined that his sister Xiaoxi was still waiting for him. And if he hadn't been so greedy, he wouldn't have gotten here, and now he can't give up so easily. The guy thought that it was fortunate that Xiaoxi still had his bank card, and the first bonus should have been enough to pay for medical expenses. And this, according to his balance, was 104,230 yuan. He thought that why he was so dissatisfied, he had gained hope for his sister to be healthy. The hero began to remember something. About how he fought with two monsters, and how they broke his fingers, so that even his heart almost stopped. Suddenly, the information system reported that the guy had an unread message, and he wanted to read it by pressing the button. But the system again issued a message that the player Yu Xiaobei's points have reached 3,000 and he will be able to access new system powers. The guy was immediately happy and thought that there were some new system powers. Of course, he wanted to activate them. Having pressed the button to activate, the guy received a message that the system permissions had been updated, and now he had access to the shopping center. The Rage Systems shopping center included a development store and a main store. Suddenly, the guy thought that the store opened because he had accumulated enough points. The system also sent a message that it was designed taking account his condition, and this could help him improve his abilities. And yet, the shopping centers for beginners look good, the guy thought. Looking at the information table, he said that there were quite a few useful categories that could help him now. Seeing a key where it was written that it was possible to recover physically, he tried to press it, after which a function was displayed that the treatment of severe injuries costs 1,000 points, and thinking that it looks like other products in this store are not cheap. It was a small capsule that treated severe injuries, and he thought that if he didn't try, he wouldn't know if it could help him or not. After purchasing the capsule, his balance is 680 points. The guy took a sip of this capsule and groaned heavily. After this difficult battle, the hero was so tired and he thought that everything would really be fine. The gang that attacked the guy sat in the gym and discussed how to catch him and neutralize him. Sitting on a chair with his head wrapped, Hyan said that you saw his broken leg. Suddenly, one of the gang stood up and said that they saw him dragging her like a stray dog. With a malicious smile, Hyan shouted at them that everyone was weak and it was he who broke his damn leg. Thinking to himself, Hyan said that next time he should hide in a dark corner and wait for his death. Sitting in a huge room, Hyan told one that he should go and take the meat for lunch that his brother brought, because his brothers deserved a reward today. Suddenly, the hero received a message that the daily training was coming to an end. Points would be deducted if he refused to participate. Suddenly, the guy woke up in the cell and didn't understand how long he had been sitting here. And now he was so tired, and it felt like he had slept all day and his leg was numb. Suddenly, he remembered that his leg was broken and was very upset. Touching his leg with his hand, he was pleasantly surprised that his leg was completely intact, and this system store was just an incredibly cool thing. Once again, the hero received a message that the daily training was coming to an end. Points would be deducted if he refused to participate. Daily training, the guy thought, just in time. The information system reported that the player had entered the training ground. The hero thought that in the system store, there is also a function for weapons and a hardening function, but first you need to get it to unlock it. Leaning down, he thought that he planned to accumulate more points before buying a weapon, but Hyan is not going to stop trying to kill him, and he can't just sit around and wait for them to kill him. He thought that this will happen. Unexpectedly, the system notified the guy that he had used the card to buy a weapon, and after scanning, he was given permission to purchase a weapon. The system notified him that he would soon be redirected to the weapons department. The guy thought about what weapon was best for him to choose. An information message was received saying that player Yu Xiaobei, how unexpected, but they met again, and he was very lucky. The system also notified him that he had become the 5th player, that he had managed to get a weapon at the beginner stage, and that he should carefully select a weapon because the card for purchasing weapons can only be used once, and unfortunately, returns are not accepted. Yu Xiaobei thought that after all, few people have weapons, so both in the game and in survival, he has more chances to win than others. A map of weapons sales was displayed on the information screen, and he thought about what to choose. But unfortunately, there were only melee weapons, and having looked at a short dagger for 1,000 points, he thought that it would be ideal for the game. The guy thought that the number of points he had was limited, and he had never used such a bladed weapon, so in general, a short dagger would suit him better. And then the information system notified him that he had purchased a short dagger, and the points on his balance were 1,680. Suddenly, the system notified him that he had purchased equipment and that the weapons department would soon be closed, but he still had not received his dagger. The guy was upset and immediately wondered what to do. Suddenly, as if rays of the northern lights appeared in front of him, and from them, a small box with a remote control with a huge red button could be seen. The system notified the guy that he had used his bracelet to verify his identity and opened the weapon box. He didn't know how to do it and looked quickly at the button. Raising his hand where the bracelet was, the system began scanning and notified that the player's identity had been identified. I also received a message that the authorization was successful, and the hero saw his dagger from afar. He extended his hand and tried to take the dagger. The guy grabbed his dagger and was happy, and the system notified that he could summon a box to store weapons within a limited radius, and also did not think that weapons could be stored in this way, most likely because this is another dimension. But, nevertheless, this saves him from many problems. Suddenly, the system sent a notification that the system's daily training was ending at the end of the day and that he should start playing as soon as possible. The guy decided that he needed to start the game quickly because soon both Hyen and those behind him would get what they deserved. The new player wanted to go to the machines and buy something to eat, but one of that gang was standing there. He started yelling at the newbie, and what was he doing here? The bandit hit the guy right in the face with a sharp blow, shouting that he was blind as hell, and if he didn't deliver this to Kyan, he would break his neck. At this time, the hero was sitting nearby and heard how he swore at the new guy. The newcomer managed to buy a pack of cookies and a bottle of water. The guy thought about how to take revenge on them for this. He walked around the secret room and could not find a place for himself. Two of the gang stood near the food machines and waited for a new victim to take away all the food he would purchase. When suddenly, one of them suddenly looked to the side and began to think, and shouting loudly that he saw Yu Xiaobei, who will now be leaving the secret room. This is definitely him, but yesterday his leg was broken and he could barely move. Walking nearby, his former friend said how he did it because he saw with his own eyes that he could barely even walk and how he managed to recover so quickly. This looks a little strange, he thought. Further events unfold in the bathroom. The whole gang gathered in the locker room and thought what they would do, play cards or just have fun. Suddenly, Hyen said in a sarcastic voice that playing cards is very boring. But let's find Yu Xiaobei and we'll show him a few new tricks, after which we'll torture him until he dies. Suddenly, the hero, having heard such a conversation, approached the gym locker room, saying that this means how you are looking for me. Suddenly, as if lightning flashed in the air, the guy, with one movement of his hand, called up his safe with a dagger and said that since the law of survival says, kill or be killed, and he would probably still take the risk. Suddenly, one of the bandits shouted, "It's him, Yu Xiaobei." Seeing the guy completely alive and unharmed, the gang was very surprised because yesterday they saw him with a broken leg. Hyen also saw the guy, and cold sweat ran down his face, and he said that this couldn't be, that he had a dagger in his hands, and how could a recruit have a weapon? The main character, holding his dagger in his hands, said that talking won't fix anything, and the time has come for good old ultraviolence. Hiding around the corner, his former friend saw a guy with a dagger in his hands and thought about where and how he could get it. He said in his head that it was a dagger, but from the very beginning, he only participated in the games for beginners, and although there were several clashes with Hyen, nothing happened. Seeing the guy with the dagger, the gang thought, who the hell is he? The dagger was so sharp, and it seemed to be studying some kind of energy. The hero held out the dagger to the side in front of him and told the gang that it was time for payback. A conversation was heard from the crowd that they didn't know where he got the dagger, but they needed to get out of here. And yesterday he could barely stand on his feet, and with shouts that let's take the weapon from him. Hyen shouted to his accomplices that find a way to escape now and return to the room, and they need to call his brother and tell everything. Hyen's two accomplices rushed towards the guy with shouts and shouted that they would now break his other leg. Suddenly, two accomplices appeared before the guy's eyes, running at him with fists, and he said that although I can't just kill you, I'll think of something. Having waved his fist, the accomplice decided to knock the guy out on the spot, but he swung his dagger at his hand and red liquid ran from there. The guy thought about making them cripples. No one would stop him. The second accomplice ran towards the guy and waved his fists, but he stood and waited for the opportunity to attack him. Suddenly, the guy grabbed the opponent's arm and quickly applied a painful hold. After which, he pulled a sharp dagger across his hand, and red liquid immediately splashed out, and then he screamed in severe pain. The two accomplices were all red and screaming that they wanted to kill her. The hero bowed his head, looked them straight in the face, and waited for a second attack. The second accomplice had a very frightened expression on his face, and his hands were shaking. While running away from the room, one bandit came across a closed door while shouting that someone had closed the door and was holding it. The guy's ex-friend stood outside the door and held it. The hero, without hesitation, caught up with him near the door, and with one blow of his dagger slashed him on the back, and red liquid immediately began to run. Thinking about it, the guy's former friend said that instead of sitting silently and waiting, it's worth taking a risk, and teaming up with him could give him the opportunity to get more points. And besides, no one can see him now. Hyen thought about how even his brother had to try very hard to get this weapon, and why was he so lucky if he was a beginner? The guy listened to all these conversations and thought about something. Running away from the hero, Hyen shouted in a loud voice that he did not believe that after yesterday he could be okay. Further events took place in the shower. After a difficult battle, the guy decided to take a swim and thought that Hyen thought that his attempts to defend himself would have at least some meaning. He screamed at the guy about what he could do with his broken leg, and if he kept hitting it, he wouldn't last long. The main character stood with a sharp dagger in his hand and thought that he would just attack. Jumping in the air with a metal pipe, Hyen shouted that even before his hands apologized, even a millimeter, everything would be over with him. I swung an iron pipe at the guy, but he struck with a sharp dagger with lightning speed, causing sparks to fall. The guy shouted at Hyen that he was too slow. Suddenly, the hero cut off his finger with his sharp dagger in one motion, while red liquid gushed out. With the second blow, the hero pierced his left leg with a dagger, and red liquid gushed out from there in a large fountain. From such strong blows, Hyen fell to the floor and screamed in a voice that was not his own, and the guy stood and looked at him straight into his eyes. Hyen shouted at the guy not to come near him, and what he was going to do with him. Walking down the corridor, his former friend said that these people are dummies, and the guy shouldn't get so excited, and that he really forgot that if he kills people and breaks the rules, his bracelet will immediately break into small pieces. At the same time, the guy listened to him and thought about it. The guy looked at his former friend and said, "Well, you want to help him." In response, the hero heard that he was worried about him, and Hyen is now in such a state that even a child could kill him. But he is not like him, and let him pay for his life with points. The guy and a friend stood near Hyen, who was sitting on the floor, and heard in response that he was right. "I have a lot of points, and I will give you as many as you want if you let me go, and there are no extra points, and at the same time, we will make a mistake." "Xiaobei, if you are silent, it means that you agree," said his friend. Hyen shouted that it was possible. And sitting on the floor, standing up a little, Hayin said that he is sure that there is no problem that cannot be solved with the help of glasses. And today he admits this. And also, please tell me how much you want. The guy looked at him with such a look that goosebumps crawled all over his body. And then Yui Xiaobei, swinging his sharp dagger with lightning speed, stabbed Kaina right into the knee of his left leg and pierced right through, so that red liquid sprayed out from there in a huge fountain. A huge amount of red liquid flowed from the tip of the dagger. After which, the hero said that nothing could be resolved with him peacefully, and he would no longer step on the same rake. Further events took place in the library. The hero stood in the library and looked at how some guy looked and chose a book for himself. Suddenly, his friend came up from behind and handed the guy a bottle of water and said that he should drink it, please, and it would give him strength. While the guy was drinking water, his friend stood silently and thought about something. Unexpectedly, the guy with a smile on his face told his friend that he was holding the door and was not afraid that they would take revenge on him. The friend answered, sitting down on a chair, that of course he was afraid, but fortunately no one saw him there because the window in the door was not transparent. Sitting down on a chair, the friend told the guy that he was getting stronger and stronger, and judging by his speed, he would soon be able to participate in advanced games. The guy listened to him carefully and immediately told him to tell him honestly what his goal was. His friend said that he wants to team up with him, and he needs a strong comrade to play at a higher level, and the guy answered him to team up with me. What benefit will it do him? His comrade immediately answered him about what he had already thought and what he would do with Ao Haijin. When he returns, he will definitely want to take revenge on him for his brother. You are very strong, the friend said, but the enemy is even stronger, and even if you do not die, the likelihood that you will be able to get out is close to zero. The hero remembered that a stranger told him in the library that, as far as he knows, many teams are now interested in him, so the best solution would be to create his own. Lost in thought, the guy thought that, not to mention the fact that advanced games are more difficult and require teamwork. And the hyenas will eat the lone wolf first, he thought. The guy answered his friend about how he could help if we teamed up, and whether he knew a lot about advanced games. The friend told him that, although his fighting skills were not the best, he had many connections and a network of informants who constantly brought him useful information, and if they worked together, they could use these resources to form teams for games. The guy listened to his friend and told him that the competition of advanced games is extremely high. The winning team will receive very valuable prizes, and if we are lucky, then one victory will be enough to increase our level. He told him that you understand that joining a team does not guarantee safety, and first we need to try to play a few intermediate games to understand something. So you agree? His friend told him. Shaking hands, the friend told the guy that everything would be fine, so as not to worry, he would not let him down. Further events took place in cell A19. Chen Qing came to Hai Ying's cell and, sitting on the floor, asked his accomplice that he had not died yet. The accomplice told him that he was still alive, but the bleeding was too strong because the bone was damaged. It's all you Xiaobei did. Wait. But yesterday, Haiyan said that everything between them had already been decided. Well, yes, he saw with his own eyes how Haiying broke the guy's leg, and today he heard that Xiaobei arrived safe and sound, and even with a sharp dagger. Chen Qing thought that where did he get the knife from? He didn't notice it yesterday. Well, he just underestimated it. Also, one of the gang said that before leaving, Brother Haijin warned them, but no one listened to him, and now they are scared that he has a knife, and his guys are not able to do anything to him. Standing in the middle of the cell, with his hands in his trousers, Chen Qing told them not to worry. He would handle him, and they must avenge Hai Ying and restore their honor. Chen Qing thought about something for a minute. With a malicious grin, he said that no one would cooperate with such a rabble, and his goal was to take possession of their weapons. The events took place 3 days later. The guy sat and looked at his friend and said that he had a rest and was sure that it was worth participating in one more game. And in response, he heard from him that, of course, he also did not want to miss the opportunity to get more points. Xiaobei thought to himself that for an intermediate game with increased difficulty, a team of 3 is needed, and maybe call the girl Zhou. The guy said that after teaming up with Jiang Ye, they played a few games. He was not as strong as he expected, but in the process, he noticed that he had good reactions and a developed sense of battle, and they did well, and they made an excellent team. With a smile on his face, Jiang Ye raised his hand with the bracelet and said that at this rate, we will reach the advanced game in no time, and for him to look at how many points he already has, and thinking that he is quite ambitious, but we have one goal, to rise to a new level. He thought that when the number of points reached 4,000, the information system would prompt him to unlock new skills. Suddenly, the information system told him that he has a skill as a phantom double, and this is the activation condition if he has 100 game points with a cooldown of 3 minutes, and when he is attacked using the skill, a phantom double can be moved to another place, leaving instead yourself an illusion. The hero raised his hands and was very happy that he already had a second skill called Phantom Double, and it was a pity that using it would waste points, and the cooldown was quite long. He would have to get used to it. Xiaobei told his friend that let's leave early, because the battle will be very difficult. Jiang Ye replied that Chen Qing has been watching you for several days but has not done anything. Most likely he is planning something. The guy immediately realized that this was definitely because of Ao Haiyan and his weapons, and he is very strong, so it is better not to rush. Their guy suddenly received an SMS message on his bracelet saying that Zhou was busy now and would not be able to come. How suddenly his friend was upset that another missed opportunity to meet a girl, and finding a team for the second-level intermediate game was quite difficult, so what should they do? Suddenly, the hero received a message on his electronic bracelet that there was a request to join the team. The guy saw the message and became very thoughtful. The electronic bracelet shows that the player Chen Qing wants to join your team, and you agree or not. Xiaobei thought and remembered that this guy was from the gang who wanted to kill him. Suddenly the hero saw him, and he greeted him with a malicious smile. Further events took place in the cell. Suddenly, in the cell, Kaiyan felt a little better after a difficult battle with the hero, and he shouted to his accomplice to give him more points, and when his brother returns, he will give him twice as much, otherwise he will die from lack of points. Haiyan shouted loudly that he did not want to die, and his accomplice ate his cookies without giving anything in return, and now it was time to pay his debts. His accomplice replied that it's not that he doesn't want to help, it's just that he's already given a lot, and because he doesn't participate in the games every day, they take away 500 points, and he can't afford to give such a number of points goes nowhere, and that's too much. Leaving the cell, the stranger said that it is impossible to contact his brother now because communication is not available in advanced games, and he wants to go find someone else and see if someone wants to share points with you. Haiyan looked at his bracelet and realized that he had completely run out of points and began writing an SMS message to his brother. He wrote that his leg was broken and he was in a lot of pain. All the points were almost gone. Why didn't he come when he was beaten, and he would no longer be able to see him, and that he would kill you for his sake? Haiyan thought about how it came to this, and he doesn't want to die. And his electronic bracelet received an SMS notification that the remaining time to participate in the daily game is 00 minutes 01 seconds, and 500 points will be deducted from the player Haiyan as a fine, and 0 points remain on the account. And when there are 0 points left on the account, the bracelet immediately goes into punishment mode. The bracelet on his hand began to make strong alarm sounds, and his hand began to become covered with some kind of bubbles. Hyen looked at himself and saw how his whole body was covered with large blisters and ulcers, and he began to yell in a voice that was not his own. Not even a minute had passed before a strong explosion occurred, and red liquid splashed across the entire chamber and flowed along all the walls. The hero again received a message that the player Chen Qing wants to join his team. Do you agree or not? The hero's friend told the guy that his guesses were correct, and Chen Qing wants to join his team, and he clearly wants to avenge the murder. But in the game, they don't always execute, and he categorically asks him to disagree. Xiaobei thought that after so many days, he had finally made up his mind, and most likely he knew that weapons could not be used in beginner games and intermediate games, and that was why he wanted to act now. Chen Qing entered the room where his friend and hero stood and said how glad he was to see him. He grinned and told the hero that he had underestimated him, and let's play a game, but the guy said that teaming up with him was not a good idea. Then Chen Qing replied that if he considers him an eyesore, then just let him kill him in the game so as not to interfere, and really hopes that they will find a common language. The hero thought that even if he refused him now, he would still come back and ask for more and more, and it was better to end this once and for all. The guy told him to put his jokes aside, and that he hated him even from their first meeting. Xiaobei looked at his electronic bracelet and pressed the button for player Chen Qing to join his team. The hero answered him well, "Show me the strength of the top 10 players." Suddenly, in a malicious voice, Chen Qing said that the newcomer who is rising so quickly in the rankings is dangerous for him, but no less interesting, and that the hero is always so calm. It's even curious what's so special about him. The hero and his friend went to the game room. They walked along the corridor, and his friend told him that Chen Qing is indeed very dangerous and he is confident in him. But if his friend does not want to play, he can refuse, and he will find someone else. Having thought well, his friend told himself that if he did not agree, he would no longer be accepted into the team, and he could not give up everything he had worked on for so long. And his friend shouted in a loud voice that he would play, and they were one team, and they had a better chance of beating him. Suddenly, the information system notified that all 3 players had entered the gaming room in a 2-star mid-level intermediate game. Suddenly, a huge spiral staircase appeared in front of the players. 3 players stood on the platform and saw how a winding staircase led them straight into the sky. The hero's friend said, "What kind of garbage is this? Why is the location of the game at the 2-star level so terrible? And wherever you step, there is an abyss everywhere. And if we fall, we will definitely die." Xiaobei thought about how they could continue the game. Suddenly, Chen Qing raised his head and saw some strange monster at the very top of the stairs. The monster was so terrible and disgusting. The stairs to the top were very steep and hung straight into the sky. The information system announced that the task is that the players must get to a stand with 3 stickers, stick all the stickers on parts of the monster's body, and these are the forehead, heart, shins, and each will receive 1,500 points for this game, since the game time not limited. There was also a repeated message that the 2-star intermediate game would begin in 10 seconds. And players, please get ready to play. The guy thought that time was limited, and he also didn't know what this game room was like, and it was obvious that this was his first time here. The guy's friend said that he noticed that something was wrong here, which means we need to complete the task in any time to get out, and if we can't, then what will happen? Suddenly, Chen Qing looked with a malicious smile and said that we would most likely end up with this monster forever. The cunning and sneaky Chen Qing told the hero that if he wants to get out of here alive, let him give him his weapon, and then he will think about whether to help him or not. And let him remember, the longer he waits, the more dangerous the game becomes. The friend answered the guy that most likely he knows the weak points of the monster. And although the tasks in the games are different, monsters at the average level are repeated, and it is not surprising that he has already encountered this before. The hero thought that there was 1 second left before the start of the game, and that means we need to find a way to kill him first. Otherwise, this game will become even more dangerous for the two of us. The countdown is over, and the game has begun. Suddenly, they saw something fall to the ground with a huge crash. Suddenly, a pathetic, disgusting monster appeared in front of them, screaming loudly in a voice that was not its own. The information system gave such a message that the players must get to the rack with 3 stickers and attach them to the monster's body parts: forehead, heart, shins. While for this game, everyone will receive 1,500 points for each participant, and there is also no time limit. The monster saw the 3 players, and its eyes glowed like red lanterns. On the legs of this monster were metal pistons with springs and shock absorbers. The guy's friend said that this monster's body is covered with purulent blisters, and how disgusting it is. But the guy also thought that these springs on the legs are very bad for them, because jumping ability is a big advantage for the monster. Suddenly, the monster rushed after Chen Qing, and he again, with a malicious smile on his face, shouted that the guy had better give him his weapon before dying. The main character told Zhang Ye that if they split up, he should look for a rack of stickers, and he would attract a monster and go after Chen Xin. The guy sharply pushed off with his foot to run. Jumping A said that he had to buy time for his friend, and he needed to find the stickers as soon as possible, and he could only take the initiative if he trolled the monster to contain Chen Sina. The hero saw that the monster quickly dodged the blow and jumped up quickly and high. The bloodthirsty monster began throwing its ulcers with its claws in front of the guy, and he barely stopped and dodged. The guy saw how red, smelly ulcers began to fall before his eyes. He thought for a moment. The hero thought that this monster is covered in ulcers and even shoots them because they are very poisonous, and we will have big problems if they get on our skin. With a sudden movement in flight, he jumped onto the steps to protect himself from the monster. He thought that Chen Qing had gone down, and did he really want to be the first to find the stand, but let him not even think or try. The malicious Chen Qing continued to run headlong. The guy shouted that let the monster watch him closely, and they would chase Chen together. The steps on the stairs were very steep, and it was difficult to move along them. He tried to jump over several steps to quickly catch up with the cunning Chen Sina, trying to run up the stairs faster so that Chen Qing would not be able to reach the task level first. Like a friend, the guy came up with some kind of plan and smiled. Suddenly, he shouted to the monster that he was so slow and he needed to quickly catch up with him. He leaned on his elbow and thought about something. The guy decided to jump down, right to where Chen Qing was. He sank with his feet onto the platform, and behind him the monster, with its legs with springs and shock absorbers, crashed 2 meters away from him. The hero stood on the landing and said to Chen Qing so that he would run away, but in response he heard that Xiaobei, you are so fast that you were able to catch up with him even here. Chen Qing said with a mean smile, look at this picture. You might think that you and the monster are old comrades. The guy was very angry with him for saying such words. This is what the rack with the sticker looks like for the monster. Suddenly, the monster threw its ulcers straight towards the counter. The monster saw that the sticker had been taken from the stand and began to throw its ulcers with tentacles to neutralize the players. But Chen Qing shouted that while he had the sticker, he would decide when to end the game. Chen Qing shouted that he was sweet. You think luring the monster here was a good idea, and he knows very well that he is on springs. And with shouts, Chen Qing decided to try his blow on the guy, but he reflected it with lightning speed. The hero raised his hands and said that this guy may look weak, but he has surprisingly strong attacks. Without thinking twice, Chen Qing again decided to check the guy and struck. Suddenly, the hero's friend saw a sticker lying in a small niche in a pillar. With a smile on his face, he shouted that it was great that he had found the first sticker. Seeing that there was some kind of scuffle on the stairs, she said that Xiaobaya has a little problem and we need to help them. From the blows of the monster and its tentacles, the guy and Chen Qing began to dodge so as not to fall into his arms. Smiling, Chen Qing thought that they were standing on the edge, and then there was only a cliff, and with the last blow he would send him down, and I wondered what he would choose, weapons or life. The hero found himself with one foot above the abyss and quickly began to think. The guy was thinking that in just a few hits he had him cornered and that he was really good. The main character saw that Chen's fist, Chinya, approaching his face, and the electronic bracelet showed that an attack aimed at the player was detected. If the player wishes, he can use the phantom double skills. The guy thought that now it would become even more fun, because the current balance was 100 points. Chen Qing thought that he was about to strike hard. The electronic bracelet notified the guy that the phantom double skill had been activated, which allows him to move to another place and leave an illusion in his place. Thinking something had happened, Chen Qing looked at the guy. Chen Qing stood on the edge after the blow and could not understand where the guy was at that time. The phantom double skill is activated and the cooldown will be in 2 minutes 56 seconds. The guy thought about it and realized that recharging had already occurred and the skill was active. A phantom double, and when he was attacked, in an instant he was replaced by an illusion. The hero saw something and stared intently without taking his eyes off. I thought that Chen Qing had missed and continued to run, but he still had the sticker. The guy almost caught up with Chen Qing, and he talked about how he was just a step away from him and how he was able to dodge, while strangely, he didn't even see how he did it. Chen Qing said that although the situation is not in his favor, he is still confident that he can defeat him. Raising his hand high, Chen Qing shouted to the guy that he didn't want the sticker to fly away with him, and without it, he wouldn't get out of here, and let him try to take it away from him. Xiao Bei heard these words and shouted to him that he was a vile person, and this should not be allowed, and he needed to activate the reverse skill. Then he would know if he could take the sticker. Suddenly, the system notified the guy that his heart rate had reached 160 beats per minute, and the reverse level 2 skill was available. And also using the reverse skill level 2 will allow you to predict the movement of opponents within 5 seconds. The mode was activated and the main character knocked down. Chen Qing landed straight on the concrete floor and hit him right in the head with a punch. And with a sharp movement, he tore out of his hand the sticker he was hunting for. With a malicious smile, Chen Qing looked at the guy and shouted to him that he was caught. Grabbing the hero's leg, he held him and wanted to throw him onto the concrete floor. There was a small scuffle between the guy and that malicious Chen Qing. The guy thought that he would specifically allow him to take the sticker to drag him away, and in this way he would not fall, taking advantage of his panic, and also take the sticker back. Xiao Bei said that having driven him into a hopeless situation, he would offer salvation in exchange for weapons. This is a good plan, but it is about to collapse. Chen Qing said that the guy is so stupid and naive. While jumping, the guy wanted to attack him, but Chen Qing put his hand under his leg and pushed him hard. Having accelerated a little, Xiao Bei landed a strong kick to Chen in a jump Qing, after which he fell onto the concrete surface. Chen Qing shouted loudly about how the hell he could react so quickly and flew down. Flying down, he thought about how he could cling his hand to the stairs in order to stay alive. Grasping the base of the step with one hand, Chen Qing thought about how he could figure out his plan, and if he didn't get up, he would most likely die. Chen did not give Qinggu peace. They both fell off the concrete surface, and Xiao Bei punched him. Chen Qing hit him right on the head, and in response, he said that he was sick and most likely wanted to die with him. The main character, flying upside down, screamed at the top of his lungs so that Jianye would catch him quickly. Hearing the guy's screams, Jianye stood on the landing between the stairs and raised his hands trying to catch him in flight. When suddenly he saw that Chen was flying first, Qin followed by Xiao Bei waving his arms and legs. Finally, Jianye shouted that I have grabbed you. The guy was hanging upside down, and Jianye was holding him tightly by the leg and trying to pull him onto the platform, and Chen forwards. At this time, Chin had already fallen onto the concrete floor. At the same time, the guy felt uneasy, hanging upside down over the abyss. Events are unfolding during the day, and the sun is shining very brightly. The monster sat hidden and did not touch the participants in the game yet. The players already had 2 stickers, and they just had to find one more. Tired of a hard battle, the hero and his friend sat in a tunnel on the concrete floor and thought about what they should do, because they had already searched every corner and still had not found the 3rd sticker, or maybe Chen Qin flew away with her. Xiaobei told his friend that no, he was running after him all the time, so he had no way to hide another item, and there were only 2 racks of stickers on the stairs, and he was sure they were somewhere else. Jianye told the guy that in what place he examined every brick here, and if they don't find her, they will simply die from exhaustion. After thinking, the guy said that there was one more place where we had not been since the very beginning of the game. His friend replied that it was impossible, but we examined every centimeter here. The hero thought that even a fool would understand that if Chenqing dies, the system will show that there are 2 of us left, but the table still showed that the number of players is 3 and has not changed. The guy thought that Chenqing was still alive, and that means there could be other places here. The monster sat at the top of the stairs and waited for the players. He was so ugly, covered in warts and ulcers. They were still thinking about how to get to the monster, but they lacked one more sticker. Jianye looked out of the arch and thought something while looking up. And I said in Xiaobei, well, until we go out to the monster ourselves, he won't attack them first, and they need to get around him and get to the very bottom. The guys began to go down the stairs. The hero came up with the idea of how to climb down on a rope. Having torn his clothes and twisted a rope out of it, Jianye told the guy that he was sure that he wanted to go down, and there wasn't even a bottom visible, but they had to check, and the monster's attacks weren't as scary as what they couldn't find sticker. The rope was already ready, and it was possible to climb down. Xiaobei began to carefully descend, but his friend shouted that if something went wrong, he should give a signal, and he would immediately pull him out. Jianye told the guy not to forget about the sticker because he didn't want to hang around here forever. While going down the rope, the guy looked down and was a little scared. Suddenly, as I was going down, I saw that there was a staircase, and you could go down it straight to the very bottom. He decided to jump off the rope onto the stairs. Letting go of the rope, he climbed onto the ladder and began to descend straight down. Suddenly, he looked down and thought that everything was covered with clouds, and it was hard to see, but there was no way back, and he had to be very careful. He climbed the stairs, and it was as if there was no bottom. The guy saw that it was the last step and did not know what to do next. Looking down, Xiaobei said, "Where is Chen Qing?" The ladder did not reach the end, and he decided to jump down to the bottom. Not much frightened, he thought something. The guy saw the bottom, as if it was the bottom of a hole. Pushing off from the stairs, the guy in flight decided to get there. The guy flew head down and shouted out loud that it was clear that there were many more hidden places here, and thought that there must be a 3rd sticker here. Below there was some kind of covering and unknown objects. Chen Qing was sitting on the floor, thinking about something. Having woken up here after a strong fall, he did not know where he was and how he ended up here. Chen Qing looked at an unknown thing hanging from the ceiling, and it seemed to him that the sticker was there to get out of here. The thing that hung under the ceiling was emitting unknown signals. The hero slowly descended headfirst into this unknown room, when suddenly Chen Qing saw Xiao falling Beiya and shouted to him that he had already waited for him here. While floating in the air, the main character thought that if he just fell, he would break. The third sticker was actually in that thing under the ceiling, distance from Guy to Chen. The price was already small. Soaring in the air, the guy constantly had the thought that he was flying very fast and he wouldn't have time to do anything. The main character had almost said goodbye to life, but the unexpected happened and he fell onto the surface, but it turned out that it was like an air cushion. Chen Qing muttered with a malicious smile that the guy fell much more shamefully than him, and the poor guy was probably very scared. The guy said, Chen Qing said that he was lucky that he fell here and didn't die, but he responded by saying that it's strange that a hero can play to his advantage in any situation. Chen Qing told the guy what he was hiding from him, or whether he had some secrets. The guy thought that he was a smart bastard, since now it doesn't matter, and didn't he come here because of his weapon? In any case, I won't be able to give you the weapon, but I know another way to get the weapon, and if you're interested, I'll tell you. Chen Qing told him that he thought that getting a weapon would be as easy as buying cabbage. While standing, the main character said that, well, what is it like to serve Ao Haijin, and whether he can play high-level games or not, he most likely obeys his orders, and as long as he stands in his way, he will be able to rise higher. The hero thought about it and said that he wanted to guess why he was so impatient to take away his weapon. Most likely, he wanted to get away from Haijin and fight him. Chen Qing, after listening to the guy, thought very hard. The guy told Chen Qing that he knew that there were several other types of weapons, and Haijin owned one of them. Standing silently, Chen Qing just looked intently at the guy and was constantly thinking about something. The hero also said to himself that, indeed, while he was descending, he constantly thought that if Chen Qing had died during the fall, then now he would not be their enemy. Turning, Xiaobei told him that how about becoming a member of my team and we will kill Ao together. Hajin and his weapon will become his, but if not, you can certainly refuse and continue to be content with your gang of idiots. There was complete silence in the room. You are trying to lure me into a trap, said Chen Qing, and why should I trust you? And is it dangerous to go against Ao himself, Hygiena? The guy listened to him and said, is it generally safe here? Or is it better to control your own destiny, and at the same time, it's okay if he refuses? Smiling, the hero said that you really want to obey him all the time, but in any case, his goal is to get rid of all the obstacles that stand in his way. Chen Qing said that you guys are terribly interesting. Okay, the guy said these conversations, let's first get this sticker and find a way out, and then we'll talk some more. The sticker was very high near the ceiling. Chen Qing said that it was good that you were so persistent in looking for me. I don't even know how long it would take me. And before he came down, he was studying this gong. He grabbed a huge hammer and began to follow the prompts and beat the gong. After each hit, cubes will appear under this sphere, and the hero will have to climb them and get the sticker. Xiaobei thought that it was not surprising that Chen Qing fell into a trap, since here you cannot go alone, and this is probably a test of teamwork, because there is an air cushion here. So that no matter how fast we fly, everything will be fine, and all you have to do is hit the gong to start climbing for the sticker. A strong blow sounded on the gong. Chen Qing shouted to the guy that it was time for him to go. The gong sounded loudly again. The hero constantly thought about their conversation. Suddenly, after hitting the gong, a huge cube appeared in the room and fell to the floor. 3 cubes had already fallen, and the hero had to immediately climb down on them to get the sticker under the ceiling. Having climbed onto the very last cube, the guy thought that each cube disappears about 5 seconds after it appears. And the main thing is that Chen Qing has time to hit the gong. The hero heard that the gong was struck one after another. The rhythm became faster and faster, and the distance between them became greater and greater. Chen Qing looked with his eyes and thought something, screaming out loud that he was late, and he still had to hit 3 things, but he didn't have time. The guy leaned over and looked sharply down. Suddenly, the cube began to collapse under his feet, and the guy did not understand what was happening and thought that Chen Qing did not hit the gong in time. Not even a minute passed, and the guy fell to the floor with great speed. With a malicious smile, Chen Qing told the guy that there was a small mistake, and he still didn't get hurt because he fell on the floor and it's soft. Taking from Chen Qing, Mace said that he was not such a strong player, and now he would try to hit the gong. The ceiling in the building was very high. Chen Qing was very tired when he was hitting with a hammer and sat down to rest. Suddenly, Xiao Bei began to run around the room at great speed, and Chen Qing was surprised by this. What a circle it was already, and thinking that most likely he needed to warm up before knocking on the gong. The hero ran at great speed, and finally, having collected enough beats, and his current pulse was 175 beats, and the reverse skill will predict his future. And this is just perfect for such a game. The guy will shout in Chen Qingwu, "Let him start." Further events took place in the boxing ring. The gang accomplice sat in a metal cage and shouted that he really helped Haiyan when he was seriously wounded and lost a lot of blood, and he could not do anything about it. Most likely, it was Ao Haijin with a sword in his hands. Ao Haijin stood at full height with a huge sword in his hands near the cage. Very angry, Ao Haijin thought that Xiao Bei wields weapons, and his speed of development is simply amazing. Shouted to his accomplice that he asked Chen Qing to deal with that bastard Xiao Bei. And by the way, where is he, and where did he go? But someone from the crowd said that he saw them enter the game room, and probably Chen Qing wants to kill him in the game, but it is not over yet. Ao looked with a thoughtful gaze. Haijin said that if he had not been placed, he would not have stayed in the game for so long, but it is almost useless to talk about it now. Ao Haijin gathered all the gang members and said that he would not rest until he killed you with his own hands. Xiao Bei, and ordered them to go and wait for him near the doors of the game room, and if he dies in the game, then he is lucky, but if he comes out healthy and unharmed, then they must bring him to him urgently. Having released the beaten accomplice from the cage, they brought him to Porce. Ao Haijin shouted at him to spare him. They beat their gang member very much because he did not give points and did not save Cayenne. Without listening to him, Ao Haijin struck his accomplice with a sharp blow with his sword, so that red liquid instantly splashed out. He fell to the floor without signs of life. Ao's malicious glance, Haijin said that if he really helped his brother, then how could he die due to the deduction of points? And let's start with him. Let him experience the same pain that Haijin suffered from. The events continued in the room where the guys needed to get a sticker. Xiao Bei shouted Chen Qing that he is now where he fell last time. The guy thought that he could activate the reverse skill. Chen Qing shouted to the guy that now the speed and number of gongs will increase. At least it was so for him, and whether he can definitely do it. The information system showed that using the reverse skill level 2 allows you to predict the enemy's movement within 5 seconds. The number of hits on the gong was constantly increasing. Having activated the reverse skill, the guy stood with a mace in front of the gong. Xiao Bei thought that 4 gongs light up almost simultaneously, and if you don't know about it before, then at such a speed and distance, it is difficult to hit each one. The main character, with incredible speed, after activating the reverse skill, managed to hit the gong at several points simultaneously. Chen Qing smiled and was very pleased. Sitting on the floor, he thought that thank God he managed to build all the cubes. Seeing how the cubes were already standing in a row, he told him that he had to try very hard to jump to the counter. Having accelerated, Chen Qing jumped onto the cube and ran up to reach the goal. Running almost to the ceiling, he raised his hand to cling to the chandelier and take out the sticker. The hero thought that thank God he was succeeding. He hung with one hand behind this so-called chandelier and tried to pick up the sticker. Chen Qing shouted to the guy that it was difficult, but he was able to do it and extended his hand with the sticker. The cubes he climbed on began to gradually fall apart. And then Chen Qing shouted that it was time for them to leave. "Well, yes, go first," said the guy. Jianye stood at the edge of the stairs and looked into the distance. The guy's friend thought why he still hadn't returned, but what if something had happened? Suddenly, the rope began to twitch from below, and the guy shouted for Jianye to pull them out. Suddenly, Jianye shouted that Xiao Bei has returned, and he needs to pull the rope so that he can lift them. Having pulled out the hero, Jianye waited for something else to pull out Chen. Jianye said that the guy is confident about that. Chen Qing will not deceive them and will not put a knife in their back at any opportunity. But the guy told him not to worry because he keeps the third sticker with him. The hero replied that he was still hesitating and sooner or later he would be on the team with them. Pulling Chen with a rope, Qing, he shouted to them that, "Let's quickly put these stickers on because he's dying of thirst." But Jianye warned the guy to still watch him carefully. Chen Qing smiled and said that all the stickers have been collected. Let's continue. The information system reported that the game room is 54. Its status is closed. Jianye was very pleased that the stickers were so easy to apply, and everyone received plus 2,000 points for the game. All three left the game room into a special room and saw something unpleasant. The main character looked intently to the side. Jianye and Chen Qing froze in place and thought about what to do. The gang was all assembled, and there were a lot of them, and the guys were thinking about how to resolve this situation. When suddenly one shouted that Chen Qing, "Why couldn't you help the poor child, and how hard you tried, since you failed the instructions that Ao gave you?" Haijin. Chen Qing stood listening to him and said nothing. The hero was standing next to Jianye when a big guy from the gang approached them with a malicious smile and asked if it was you. "Xiao Bei, Ao's brother, Haijin wants to greet you." Jianye told the guy about what we will do now. If we just leave, we will definitely die. But the hero told him not to panic, and no one will beat them because there are too many people. The guy pointed at Jianye and said, "Let him go first, anyway. He's only on the team for numbers, and I'll follow him." When suddenly one of the gang said that he was such a good boy, he made their job easier. As he was leaving, one bandit said that we didn't need him. Let him get out. He also said that Chen Qing will come with us. "Brother, Ao Haijin wants to see you too." Further events take place in the gym. The hero and the guys entered the gym, where there were a large number of Ao's accomplices, Haijin, who stood and listened to him. Most likely, Ao Haijin, upon learning that his brother Haijin had died, became very angry, and in order to get out of here, he needed to get to Ao himself, Haijina. Further events took place in the boxing ring. Approaching the boxing ring, one of the big guys from the gang told the hero what he was worth and to go forward. The guy looked at him intently. Chen Qing stood next to him and could not say anything in response. "Ao Haijin is most likely angry with me," Chen Qing said, and one of the big guys from the gang said, "You come in and find out." The guys entered the boxing ring and said that it was their first time here. The hero looked around and thought about something. Suddenly, Ao came out, Haijin, grabbing Chen's neck with one hand. Sina tried to hit him hard. Chen Qing was very afraid of Haijin. After the strong blow, Chen Qing was thrown a long distance and fell. He fell and red liquid gushed out of his mouth. Approaching the guy, Ao Haijin stepped on his face with his foot and shouted loudly. Ao Haijin said to Chen Qing, so that's how he did what he asked him to do. The guy started to apologize and said that he tried his best, but it didn't work out. Suddenly, a safe with a sword appeared. Unexpectedly, Ao Haijin took out a sharp sword from the safe and, shouting that he was messing with his ears, stopped in front of him. The hero thought to himself that he had seen such a weapon in the store. Ao Haijin approached the guy who was lying on the floor and, stepping on his foot, said that he would pay for his mistakes and wanted to cut off his hand. Chen Qing lay on the floor and couldn't believe his eyes what he could do to him now. Swinging his sword, Ao Haijin suddenly met the hero's sharp dagger. Eyes of Ao Haijin shone like a red lantern. Haijin soared with his sharp dagger. Embittered Haijin shouted to the guy that he most likely wanted to be next in line after Chenchina, and don't let him worry, that he will take care of him too, so that he too will know what death tastes like. The hero shouted that he didn't want to upset him, and let's see who wins first. Swinging his sharp dagger, he reminded him that he is not as hopeless as Ao Haijin. And the guy's sharp dagger flew in front of Haijin's nose. The guy, with a sharp manner, dodged Haijin's blow and moved to another position. After this, he said that the guy is pretty fast and let's see how he copes with this. Raising his sharp sword, Haijin wanted to strike, but the guy was no longer there. Suddenly, the guy received an SMS notification that using the reverse level 2 skills would allow him to predict the enemy's movement within 5 seconds. The gang's accomplices stood and looked at all this, and one said that this was the end of him. He was a corpse. Haijin's speed was so great that even monsters in games were hiding from him. The guy thought for a moment about how to carry out a killing blow. Haijin and the guy seemed to be floating in the air and waving their weapons. This is impossible, and this freak couldn't even look at me since he managed to dodge him, said Haijin. The guy said that he was very lucky and managed to activate the skill and predict his movements. Otherwise, he would have been seriously injured. The hero and Haijin stood at a distance of about 3 meters and thought about how to hit each other on the spot. Xiaobei was very determined to win and told him, well, let's start. The system notified the guy that the player successfully dodges attacks and the reverse level 2 skill is active, and the player receives a boost for 2 minutes. With a menacing look, Haijin told the guy that he would cut off all his limbs, and he would beg for mercy, lying in front of his feet. The lights were on in the hall, and lamps hung from the ceiling. Haijin ordered his accomplices to urgently turn off the lights. Suddenly, there was a big fight between the guy and Haijin. The fight was almost equal, and the sword and dagger were flying in the air. Thinking that their speed was equal, Haijin couldn't imagine it. Unexpectedly, the hero used his phantom replacement skill, and the enemy completely lost him from the battlefield. Suddenly, the guy's sharp dagger was already on Haijin's neck, and he ordered him not to twitch.